Good evening. I would like to call our council meeting on Monday, December 15th to order at 6 p.m. I'm Mayor McNeil Smith, and colleagues in the chamber. To my far left, Councillor Novick, Councillor Rintoul, Councillor Gurnett, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Duck, and we have Councillor O'Keefe participating online. Good evening, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you.
And good evening to members of staff, and both in the chamber and maybe participating online. We do introduce staff at the time they may be speaking. And good evening to members of the public, both here in the chamber and to those who may be watching the live webcast and or the meeting at a future date. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that we're holding our meeting, and indeed the entire town of Sidney is in the territory of the Wasanich people, the Sayot Nation, the Sartlip Nation, the Pakwachin Nation, the Malahat Nation, and the Sakem Nation. And we express our gratitude to the Wasanich people for their stewardship of these lands and waters for millennia, that is thousands of years. And we appreciate, while these are their ancestral lands, that it is important that we work together for the future of, for the stewardship of these lands and waters for the generation alive today, but for future generations as well. In turning to approval of the agenda, we have a couple of changes and some additional correspondence since the agenda was published last Thursday. The changes to the agenda is item 13A is the cannabis retail store license application. We will move that item 13A right after the special public participation period that we have under 7B for the same item. So that is a special public participation period for just that item, and I'll call upon any members of the public who wish to address council at that time. After we approve the agenda, we'll approve minutes, and we will go to our regular public participation period where individuals can speak on other matters than the cannabis license. And then I would like to move the presentation under D1. It's the 2025 point in time count findings. I would like to move that presentation right after public participation, then go into the cannabis special public participation, and then the agenda item. So there's those changes and the additional correspondence. In addition to correspondence on the cannabis application, we've had an additional 46 emails since Thursday, and we've had 2 petitions, one in support and one opposed, and I will speak to those that correspondence and those petitions when we come to the special public participation period. So with that, I would seek a mover, Councillor Duck, and seconder, Councillor Novick, to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor? Thank you. Opposed? None are opposed. That carries. And we have 2 sets of minutes. Those from our sorry?
Mayor, I think,
Mr. Edwards.
were you going to raise an item from correspondence?
Well, thank you, Mr. Edwards, for that. I do wish to raise, if I could just have a motion, since the agenda has been approved, a motion to raise item 15.4, the letter that we had with regards to the Bowerbank-Percy intersection, and move that to 14A.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. And so we have 2 sets of minutes on our agenda, those from our regular council meeting on November 24th, and those from our council meeting of December 1st. If I could have a motion to approve, moved by Councillors Duck and Novick. Any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None are opposed. That carries. So now we're coming down to our regular public participation period, where members of the public are invited to come forward to speak to council for up to 3 minutes on any item on the agenda. And tonight that would exclude the cannabis application with its separate section. So I'll call for a first time if anyone is wishing to come forward. Please come forward. Good evening, Mr. Austin.
Good evening. I just wanted to thank the Committee of the Whole for support of my variance for this short overhead power line that we're trying to get. And I wanted to comment that I have support from neighbors around me. The property directly to the east of us, Jim Severs has given me a support. Greg Dickinson from Van Isle has provided support. Jeff Spencer, who runs the chandlery on the property to the west of us. And the business owner runs the deli across the street. And another residence on the street as well. So 5 people that I've talked to have all supported the same variance. So just wanted to thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'll call for a second time. Anyone wishing to come forward? And a third time, seeing none. Oh, please come forward. I don't mean to rush. Good evening.
Hello. Okay. Evening. My name is Jamie Wellbourne. I live in Sidney, and I just want to have a quick bit of feedback about Barbank and today with the weather-related closure of Resthaven. I know you've taken a lot of heat over Barbank, so I don't really want to add to it. But I hope you'll see my concerns as coming from a place of hoping to make the bikeway a success and the best that it can be. So I'm concerned that Barbank was reopened at Piercy today during the weather-related closure of Resthaven. This kind of defeats the purpose of it being an all ages and abilities facility. So people with young kids, elderly, trying to use this facility and expecting it to be low volumes, suddenly, unexpectedly, it's open to more cars again. And I just feel like this is not the right approach to take. What I'm hoping to see is that there would be some kind of threshold of emergency situations or situations where there's no other options at all. As in this situation, they could have taken the northbound route onto Patway Highway by the Co-op gas station, done a loop around Wayne Road there, and come back that way. So, in my opinion, there was alternates available, and this didn't seem like it was necessary. Yeah, I hope you'll see that as positive feedback and not more negativity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wellbourne, and I might speak to it very briefly and ask staff for perhaps some additional information. So there was an emergency on Resthaven where Resthaven was closed between I believe between Ardwell through Calvin all the way over to Amelia. And if staff confirm, was it a tree on a power line that caused the emergency?
Thank you, Mayor. I do believe it was a power line issue, and there have been multiple power line issues throughout town today, not just in Sidney, all along the coast, in fact. And so, yeah, I believe it was a power line issue on Resthaven.
Thank you. And living in that area and having to detour myself at the middle of the afternoon when it occurred, our emergency management personnel who were on site made the decision to open for the short period of time that was necessary that Barbank. So I appreciate the impact that you brought to our attention, but in the case of emergency, we do trust our emergency management to take good decisions for the benefit of the community at large. I'll call for a third and last time. Anyone wishing to come forward to council? I'll now close public participation, and before going to our next item is the presentation on the 2025 point-in-time count, and pleased to welcome Shelley Cook this evening. I think you're aware that you do have up to 10 minutes for your presentation, and we'd invite or ask that you might take any questions members of council might have following.
It has to be read. Thank you so much. Perfect. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm not sure that I need the microphone, but my name is Dr. Shelley Cook, and I am the Executive Director of Community Social Planning Council of Greater Victoria. We are a long-standing charitable organization, nonprofit, that has been serving the region for close to 90 years. Next year is our 90th year. Our mission is to advocate equity and better quality of life through community-based research and analysis, engaging with citizens, informing policy, and through service delivery. As discussed, I'm here tonight to talk to you about the 2025 point-in-time homelessness count for the capital region. So this will be, I think, the 6th time Community Social Planning Council has conducted the count on behalf of the region. So the count was conducted in March and April of 2025, and the findings released through the Capital Regional District in late September of 2025. Just a couple of comments before I get into the findings. I can certainly actually move on to this for you. Point-in-time count is a standardized, federally funded approach to estimating the amount of people experiencing homelessness on a given night. We very much use a regional approach, which we think is really important because I think, as we know, homelessness does not necessarily respect municipal or other jurisdictional boundaries. So a regional approach is very important. We also know that it is an undercount. So I think it's something to keep in mind. But what it does do is provides us with incredibly valuable information on experiences of homelessness and what is contributing to it. So this year's count involved 130 volunteers that we trained and got them ready and fanned them out across the region. You can see on the slide, there was 45 survey routes across the CRD. Sidney had an extremely long route, and we crafted these routes in dialogue with local service providers, outreach workers, to ensure that we were capturing the people who were unhoused in the region. And we had volunteers walk the routes, and they both enumerated as well as surveying people who were homeless. We also conducted 5 magnet events, and really what those are is to draw people in. So we have an opportunity to survey people, to sit down and to learn more about their experiences of homelessness. And we had those across the region. So specifically for Sidney, we held a magnet event in partnership with Beacon Community Services at their offices on 3rd Street in Sidney. So now just moving into some of the key highlights of the count. And again, I do want to emphasize it is sadly an undercount. So what we found was 1,749 people experience who were completely unsheltered. Well, varying forms of homelessness, and I'll speak to that in a minute. This is about a 5% increase from 2023. So among those, there was 318 completely unsheltered, 493 emergency sheltered, 73 couch surfing, and I'll speak to hidden homelessness again in a moment, 112 in public systems, and 750 in transitional housing. One thing we know is that vehicular homelessness is growing rapidly across the region. This is one thing that we're hearing from a number of different people. And homelessness is taking shape in similar and distinct ways, including vehicular homelessness, which we did not even begin to capture for a number of reasons I could get into, but again, certainly if you're interested, I can share more. Of the 1,749 people, 71.6% were male, 22.9% were female, and that's pretty consistent. We see some fluctuation, and just over 3% identified as gender diverse. So moving into a little bit more of the findings. So average age is about 46.7 years of people, but we did see. We found a number of youth, and we did find a number of people. So we see the ages both getting younger and older of the people who are experiencing homelessness. 1/10, as I indicated, we're seeing 1/10 of the total number are youth, which is deeply alarming. For us, 27% are over the age of 55. So we know from research if somebody's over the age of 40, they are, and in states of homelessness, they're considered senior. So at 55, that is certainly advanced age for being homeless. 30% are Indigenous, and we know that 5% of our population, so disproportionately again. So this is a consistent finding. 1/4 have lived in the area for their whole life. And so I think it's really important to think about certainly some of those pieces. A couple other points around that is 72% identified Victoria as their home. We did ask about home community. We're really trying to get at some of that stuff in different ways. And so 30% identified that they lived in communities outside Victoria. I do want to caution you, there is a high degree of likelihood of deception because people a lot of the time are being surveyed around services, and they're concerned about being barred from services if they say, I'm from Sidney, this is my home community, and they're accessing service in Victoria. So you can see how we're pretty skeptical a little bit, but it does give us some insight. Sidney was the 7th most identified area in terms of where people were from. Around the CRD. And as I talked about, we saw a large percentage of certainly hidden homelessness, and that's something we know we're not getting at, both in terms of couch surfing as well as vehicular homelessness, which is certainly taking shape in unique ways in the Sidney area. So we're certainly seeing people who are evidently living in their vehicles who are in within the sort of township, but there's also in urban for more forested rural areas sometimes, right? So we're seeing this take shape in different ways. Let me see if I have any more comments that way. I'm going to move into a discussion, and this for me is probably the most concerning slide, and I'm going to unpack it a little bit for you. So in 2023, Community Social Planning Council administered the point in time count. The number one reason we had for people not staying in a shelter was capacity. There's no room. We couldn't go. This year, by far, the number one reason was fear of safety. So this is where we're spending quite a bit of time talking about these large shelters, and people are increasingly incredibly fearful of going into those shelters because of the various things that they're concerned about. So among fear, theft, cleanliness, crowding, substance use, which is why we emphasize when we often go out to communities, talk about extreme weather responses in community and how that really meets a need for the people from those home communities. In terms of most reported service need, we're seeing very basic life-sustaining needs, right? Primary care, food, mental health is consistently one of the top ones, and identification services. So this is actually a service that Community Social Planning Council provides, helping people to get ID. And that's really about opening up all the other services. Really, ID is that key to unlock all those other services, which is why it's so important. And one thing we're seeing a lot more of is transportation. So both in terms of the work we did for the Capital Regional District around engaging related to sheltering and supportive housing, as well as through the point in time, and as well as through our administration of the low-income transit program, huge increase in the need and just the cost of transit as a significant barrier. Priority health challenges. These are certainly some consistent ones we see, but huge health issues, unmet health issues. One thing I want to point out here is that we disentangled some of these health issues a little bit for this year's, the 2025 count. We were able to pull out intellectual and developmental disability. That was often folded in with other disabilities. Now, these are the most vulnerable people we can imagine. And to think that 18% of the population identifies as having an intellectual and developmental disability is deeply, deeply concerning to us. And then we see on the far end, the number of disabilities reported among 516 respondents on the survey, that we had 87% identified at least one disability and 56% had 3 or more. So what we can see across this graph here is the fact that people with increasingly complex needs, high level of disabilities, are having the hardest time getting their basic needs met, and they are very much basic life-sustaining needs. When asked where people had slept in the past year, it's important to note that there is a significant amount, again, who talked about sleeping on couches, sleeping in vehicles, again, but we only get a glimpse into the prevalence of those issues through some of these questions, and again, for lots of reasons, including concern around bylaw and health coming in and punting people if they are living in particular forms of housing that aren't considered standard forms. There's a real concern that way. So these are the high-level findings, and certainly I'm happy to address any questions. The extensive report can be found on our website. There is also a technical appendix that goes into great detail, as well as the CRD website. So I'm happy to answer any questions in particular.
Thank you, Dr. Cook, for the presentation.
welcome.
And I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. I'll first turn to Councillor Duncan, then Councillor Duck.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned Sidney had a very long route. Do you have a map of where Sidney's route was available?
I can send that to you, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So what we actually did is we're doing we're doing quite a bit of work with mappers, and so what we think every count, by mapping the routes and demonstrating sort of where we went and how well that was able to capture, that year over year people can see. And we've mapped those routes, so we can certainly make that specific route. It was the longest route we had, for sure.
Does it include North Saanich up by
Yeah,
the highway? Okay,
absolutely, absolutely. And we work quite closely with certainly outreach members of the members of outreach teams, as well as others in key positioning in the community to determine. Yeah, it was quite a long process leading up.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And going through full reports, I've seen a lot of the tabulation of the number of communities that, particularly in the Indigenous people who end up here, come from lots of small communities, and they come in looking for a service because they come from somewhere that has none. And then they come in and then they get stuck here because they can't afford transportation back to their home community. If it's a Greyhound bus or something, and they get stranded here. And so I'm wondering if you, if your volunteers have any data on how many of the people who've come in came in because they thought there might be a detox bed for them, or, I mean, some of them say they're in because they were visiting family or friends, and then would like to be able to go home but can't and got stuck here, or how many maybe had a short-term detox bed but then they ended up back out on the street and they didn't get into one of our longer-term facilities. Do you have any idea of what our kind of unmet need there is? Because we have been building these secondary beds to have people stay in things for a longer time to make sure they're more likely to recover and get home again. But do you have the ability to collect some of that data?
Well, I think what we know, the vast majority of people are in their home community, right? And they do stay close. So 3/4 are actually from this area or have been here for over 5 years. So I think we know that the people that are here, a large proportion of them are certainly from here. I think Victoria certainly sees a high incidence of people certainly migrating for services, hence my earlier point about people maybe not being honest about home community around those things. I think when it comes to detox, ensuring that we have housing and places for people to go post-treatment and detox are some of those key pieces, and often we don't have the right supports in place, and so people can fall through the cracks again, even though they've been necessarily picked up by the right services. So I don't really have an answer specifically to that question because the issues are extremely complicated. But I think there is a portion of people, but I would say Victoria has a large incidence of people who come for food services, for shelter, and then end up sort of staying there because that's where their social capital is, right? Where their material aid is coming from. That tends to be what we find.
Yeah, thank you. I meant Victoria.
Yeah, thank
that
you.
people would make that journey and then be unable to get back up island or back up
large portion from here, very much so. And this is, I've administered counts in other regions across British Columbia, and that's very much the case. There are people we'll see from other areas of Canada, but majority of people will say they're from the island or even from the CRD.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duck?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your presentation today. A couple of questions. One, did you happen to bring along sort of what the count showed for Sidney? Just as I understand it's an undercount, but did you have an idea what?
Yeah, it was the seventh most listed of this CRD. So just a quick point around that. We did not and again, we've walked routes, we did magnet events. We know we've missed a significant amount across the region. So the number itself doesn't reflect what we know the problem is across the CRD.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with that, do you see much intermunicipal movement of these people? Like, do they, given that transportation is a challenge, but do they move from different municipality to different municipality depending on what's available in food and services?
I think there is not a lot of movement because I think what we've seen, oh goodness, I'm so sorry, I keep hitting that. What we've seen is the vast majority of services are located in Victoria. Certainly we're seeing an increase of people staying in souk. Because there's souk shelter, they're able to access some food, some shelter, so they'll stay there. Langford to some degree for sure in terms of their services, as well as Colwood. But I think what we most definitely see is people are having a really hard time having their needs met, both in terms of food, shelter, you name it. And if they have a chance, an increased chance of those things being met, they're gonna stick around where they're best able to get those options.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, did you have questions by chance?
Yes, I do. Thank you. First of all, just a comment. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I read through the report, very interesting, and the appendix as well. And Just one thing that kind of surprised me was your comment about 75%, was it 75% of the folks identified as being local to this area, which I just hearing anecdotally through the media and other places saying that people are flocking from across Canada to Victoria because they think the weather is better and there's more services here. So your report seemed to suggest otherwise, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much, and such an important piece. I had the same conversation when I lived in Kelowna, had the same conversation when I lived in Ontario, had the same conversation when I lived in Cowichan. People tend to be from the communities, and that we survey them. And certainly there is some degree of movement, but we know. So a large portion have been here over 5 years, and a large portion of them have identified that they've always been here. So people see this as their home community, most definitely.
Yeah, thanks for that. So just another question I had. So in looking at the appendix, I see that there was 11 individuals identified in Sidney, so a relatively small percentage overall, and recognizing, as you said, that you've probably undercounted.
Oh, absolutely
things.
undercounted. Absolutely.
But what I was wondering with Sidney, and I think there was about 8 in Central Saanich, so not a lot out on the peninsula, and then on the West Shore they had a few out there as well. I'm wondering, when you're looking at the data, do you see anything that's unique or different about those more outlying areas? And the reason I ask that is when we hear from some of the folks out here that are doing outreach to our local unhoused, there's suggestion that the profile is a little bit different in Sidney, maybe the West Shore, maybe in Sault, maybe downtown. So I'm just wondering if you gathered any data on that at all.
Thank you for that question. Interestingly, I actually was an outreach worker here in the 90s, so I have a really interesting perspective working with youth. What we do know in some of the more outlying is it's more invisible. Right? People are trying to fly under the radar more because I think there is a lower comfort level with homelessness. And I think that is honestly, I think people, depending on what they see every day, right, in terms of the streets, and me going to my office on Fort Street, I think that it is more hidden homelessness in the rural areas. We know that to be the case. We know, and I know from working, for example, in Colwood, more sort of those forested areas on the cusp of urban areas, right, where people are sort of blending in. In Victoria along Dallas Road, you can see vehicular homelessness, right? You can find people out in wooded areas. So for lots of reasons, we did not seek that out, in large part because we have a volunteer of people. We don't know what we're sending people into. There's a lot of assumptions. We also don't want the only form of housing and safety people to have to be taken away because we've now outed them. And that's the reality of what happens and what's happening in Langford, actually, when we were doing the count. So I think it's more invisible in rural areas.
Okay, thank you for that. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll turn to Councillor Novick, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Cook. This study really does open one's eyes. I have a couple of questions. You obviously asked your respondents quite a few questions when you were able to approach them. Were you able to ascertain the percentage of this community who have either full-time or part-time employment?
What we do know is that there's various forms of source of income. So there was absolutely people who are working who are absolutely homeless. So when we look at source of income, we see disability benefits, we see social assistance and welfare, and then we see income, so informal income sources. And then we also know that there was, I think it was about a 7% People were actually employed. And there's students as well among that. So attending higher education or working and trying to juggle those things, which are very challenging.
Okay, thank you. And government assistance, there's obviously many layers of government assistance. Were you able to determine whether or not people in your group had as much government assistance as they were entitled to?
Oh, what an interesting question. Thank you for that. Actually, I'm going to assume the answer is no. We did not ask that question, but I can tell you based on people's inability to access services, what we heard again and again, including basic health services, including housing services, including any sort of other forms of essential support, we're not able to access them.
Mm-hmm. And do you know of any organizations such as Beacon Community, and I don't know if this is the case with them, but organizations who, among other things, help the unhoused to obtain the maximum amount of benefits to which they are entitled?
What a great question. I think as part, and so we do employment services, very low barrier employment services. We work closely with Beacon Community Services around those things. And so part of that is certainly understanding, right, people's situation and helping remove barriers for them. And so we would be looking at ways we could provide assistance for them. The best example of this is our ID services program. It seems to be the number one thing people are lacking that is preventing them from getting access. But we know that even those in the greatest need and people who are new to homeless with multiple disabilities, including seniors with an intellectual disability, cannot access basic health care. So we have some issues and some ways to go in terms of how we're supporting people and their ability to access services that will help them step out of homelessness.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Cook.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And seeing no further discussion, thank you again very much, Dr.
pleasure.
Cook, for a presentation and for taking the time, for being involved, and for taking the time to come and present to us this evening.
Thank you for your interest.
We're next going to turn to the special public participation period for cannabis retail store license application. And just to while there is submissions attached to the agenda as indicated during approval of the agenda, we've had additional. So on the agenda, in the agenda package were 22 individual written submissions and 1 petition in support with approximately 170 individuals in support. And then the additional correspondence we received, 46 individual emails. We received a petition with 382 opposed, and we received another petition in support with approximately 50 individuals. So those are the submissions. I want to, normally when we have additional submissions during approval of the agenda, I will indicate the individuals' names so that they could take some comfort that they did make it to the agenda. But I do want to assure everyone who did submit correspondence right up until prior to this meeting that it is received and directed to council hours before today's meeting. And so I'll call for a first time. Anyone wishing to come forward to speak to that item, please. Please come forward. And as in regular public participation, if you can please provide your name and the community you're.
Certainly. Hi, I'm Brad Stiles, proud owner or co-founder of Truth and Alibi, 2410 Beacon Avenue. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for hearing me tonight. And I just want to start by, I oppose the new cannabis application for 2310 Beacon Avenue. Our store is 2410 Beacon Avenue, which is 220 meters away, or 1 city block. I feel our store and buds serve the town's cannabis needs, and it will impact our business, both businesses. Also, there's a store on the highway as well, and there's 2 on West Saanich Road. So that would, there's 5 right now serving the area. This would be a 6th, and how much is too much? What I'm here to talk about tonight is the Sidney Cannabis Policy, DV-015. And basically, the policy states that sensitive areas are not to be within 100 meters of any cannabis store. So this is a quote from Section C. When reviewing a cannabis application, council will consider the impact the cannabis retailer will have when they are located within 100 meters of liquor stores, childcare facilities, daycares, educational facilities, libraries, public rec centers, community centers, parks, places of worship, and other family-oriented facilities. So the application, for 2310 Beacon Avenue violates the town's cannabis policy on not one, not two, but three policies. And that's a cause for concern. Number one, the government liquor store is 80 meters away. Number two, there's a daycare that is less than 100 meters away. And number three, Bevan Park is 80 meters away. Now, what's in Bevan Park? The Sidney Visitor Center. I think that's a place where families go when they come into town. It's the gateway to our town. And they come in and, yeah, there's a lot of action around that area. And they're going to they sit at picnic tables and look at maps and figure out where they're going to go, that sort of thing. They're going to see a cannabis store right across the street. So that's one of the first things they're going to see. So I consider basically the Visitor Information Center definitely family-oriented. So that has an impact. Not a good look for the town. My question is, why do we have a cannabis policy that was updated in 2023 if we don't adhere to it? So that's a big concern. So for the betterment of the town, I think this application should be hopefully voted down. In closing, we were here 5 years ago, and at the time we said we'd run a good store. I think we do that. We talked to the town through our window, our front window, back when basically 51st State was happening. We have Canada Strong. When the Canucks were doing well, not this season, we had Canuck jerseys on the playoff run, the Oilers, that sort of thing. Right now, we have a Christmas display with little basically buildings, replications of the businesses around us. So we try to give back. And so, in closing, I think we've done a really good job, and it's a privilege to be a retailer in Sidney. It's also a very tough economy, and I hope this is voted down for the betterment of the town. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. I'll call for a second time. Is there anyone wishing to come forward, please?
Hello, Council.
Good evening.
Excuse me, I'm just going to have to read a few things off my phone here, which I have written down.
Can you first tell us who you are?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. First of all, my name is Zach Pendergast, and I'm with Truth and Alibi at 2410 Beacon. I'd like to start by saying that I'm a proud Métis man in this community, and we support our Indigenous stakeholders who have their own operations to worry about. But I'm here to voice my clear opposition to this application. Sidney is a town of roughly 12,000 residents, and we already have 2 stores that serve its needs well, with, as Brad mentioned, 3 other stores in close proximity just over the highway. Cheeky's is new, Frankie's is on the reserve land, and so is a business called Urban Meds. So that's 5 locations. This would be the 6th. That is too many. And I want to say that I spoke with the CEO of a group called ABLE BC this Saturday. ABLE is a coalition. It represents more than 1,000 pubs, bars, liquor retailers, and cannabis retailers. And they've indicated already that they have spoken with the provincial minister, and they have a strong recommendation that the cannabis industry mimic the liquor industry. The liquor industry already has a 1 kilometer minimum distance between any existing stores and any new stores. So we know it's safe, we know that's effective, we know that's good for the business world. So we should mimic the liquor industry, right? Oversaturation is already having negative impacts in communities all over the Okanagan. Penticton has lost stores, Vernon has lost stores, Kamloops has lost stores, Kelowna has lost stores. So please vote no on this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming forward. Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor McNeil Smith and members of council. My name is Cindy Pendergast. I'm one of the co-owners of Truth and Alibi Cannabis, and I appreciate the time to talk here tonight about this application. I want to first say that there are two stakeholders who are not able to be here tonight, and I have their permission to discuss things on their behalf. The first one is Silas Jones from Urban Meds, who is one of our First Nations stakeholders and is unable to be here, however, has sent in an email advising that he is opposed to another cannabis store as well. Megan from Bud's Cannabis has unfortunately had a very significant health challenge with one of her children, and she is at Children's Hospital in Vancouver tonight, and she has asked us to speak on her behalf as well. I would like to say, first of all, that when Zach and Brad talked about saturation, they really speak to how economically viable our existing businesses can be in a town of just over 12,000 people. And I want to mention something that's happened very recently in Surrey. So Surrey has allowed for 12 cannabis licenses to be opening in their area, but they have almost 800,000 people. That means that each store would service around 50 to 65,000 people. We have 12,500 people to be served by 2 current cannabis stores and hopefully not 3. I also wanted to say that there is a definite detriment to having a clustering of stores. And this again speaks to what Zach mentioned about the 1 kilometer distance requirement that's currently in place for liquor. We do believe it will be in place for cannabis in 2026. And the reasons are exactly the same. We don't want clustering. It brings some social impact that's undesirable. And then finally, I want to speak to the vibe of our town. And we know that we have many, many tourists who come here. We love our own little town here, and we value our charm. Part of our charm is through small boutiques and a very family-friendly feel and a very walkable community. And one of the things that we like to see when we go anywhere is not a proliferation of one type of store. And I think that our balance is important. I would also like to say that decisions that we make today have a very great impact on what we see tomorrow. And tomorrow, 1 kilometer distances may well be the face of cannabis. And we don't want to have allowed a decision made today to supersede that and cause an issue or a problem that we won't be able to rectify. I really have a concern about the economic viability of our businesses if we are to have 3 cannabis stores within a 4-block area in Sidney. And I do ask you to please consider these points as you debate your decisions this evening. And please do consider turning down the application and protect the charm of Sidney. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming forward. Not seeing any other speakers, I will close the special public participation period, and we'll now turn to agenda item 13A. which is the cannabis retail store license application and the summary of public feedback and next steps. I'll turn to our Director of Community Planning, Mr. Newcomb, please, to provide an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this application is a referral from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch to request the Town of Sidney's comment on a cannabis retail store license application at Unit B, 2310 Beacon Avenue. The Town of Sidney does not issue cannabis retail store licenses. We only provide recommendations to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, or LCRB, on applications that they process. That being said, the LCRB will not issue a license if the recommendation from the Town of Sidney is not favorable. So the town received a referral from the LCRB on September 12th, 2025, and staff reported to council on the 22nd of September, requesting direction on whether or not the town would like to accept the application from the LCRB. Council chose to go ahead with accepting the application at that time and directed staff to initiate the public notification process for the referral response. Following that, staff received a complete cannabis retail license application from the applicant on November 5th, 2025, and began processing the application. The staff report covers the analysis of that application and the responses gleaned from the public notification process. I won't go through every single detail in the staff report, but I will touch on some of the highlights from the analysis and feedback. So the proposed store location is located on the north side of Beacon Avenue between 7th Street and Resthaven Drive, next to the Best Western Hotel. The commercial retail unit in which the store is proposed to be would front onto Beacon Avenue. The current building would be divided up into 3 units. This proposed store would take the center unit of approximately 1,000 square feet, and most of that unit would be devoted to customer space. The proposed hours of operation are 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Slightly longer than existing cannabis stores in the community, but consistent with liquor and cannabis stores generally in Sidney. Looking to the application, the town's liquor and cannabis licensing policy has a number of considerations to be reviewed when the town is looking at applications of this type. The first is the zoning for the property. C1 zoning does permit cannabis retail, and this property is zoned for C1 and cannabis retail, and it meets the conditions of use. It also looks at the location of the site in relation to other cannabis retailers in the community and suggests that 200 meters is a minimum separation from other cannabis retailers. As mentioned earlier, the proposed location is 220 meters from the nearest cannabis retailer, Truth and Alibi, at 2410 Beacon Avenue. It's 525 meters from Bud's Cannabis on 2nd Street. And for context, Truth and Alibi and Bud's Cannabis are separated by 260 meters approximately. Another item in terms of location is looking at the proposed cannabis retail store location in relation to what I'll generally call sensitive uses. So the policy lists liquor stores, childcare facilities, daycares, educational facilities, libraries, etc. In the previous staff report the council considered, staff did note 3 locations that are within or just over 100 meters from the site. Generally, staff didn't have any concerns at that time with those 3 locations, and we continue not to. What we've seen in the past is that generally there are very few impacts from cannabis retail stores on their surrounding area. They generally seem to function as a typical retail store. Customers go in, purchase product, leave. That's about it, just like any other store. And for context, Truth and Alibi Cannabis is 75 meters from Lulu's Daycare, which is around the corner, and staff have not seen any negative impacts from that. So generally, we're not concerned about the location of the proposed store. In terms of the store and the building facade and treatment, staff have reviewed the submission from the applicant and don't have any concerns. The signage appears to be typical retail type signage. A section in the policy suggests considering the community impact. Generally, I think in relation to community impact, staff just haven't seen any impact really from cannabis stores generally in Sidney. Again, they seem to function as a typical retail store. It is a regulated product like liquor stores, but generally what we've seen is that customers go in, purchase product, and leave. We haven't seen any loitering or crime associated with them at all. No bylaw complaints or anything like that. So the remaining part of the application is considering input from the public. And following council's direction to notify the public, staff organized the placement of 2 advertisements in the Peninsula News Review. Notices were mailed to all property owners within 100 meters, and advertisement for the public feedback session tonight was included in those notices. Feedback from the public was generally mixed, slightly more on the opposed side, but there were responses in favor as well. At the time of the staff report, there were 22 responses. As noted, more came in following the deadline submission for the staff report. But generally, again, it's a mixed response with slightly more responses on the opposed side. Generally, the opposition focused on concerns about there being too many cannabis retail stores in Sidney and those stores being closely located to each other, too much proximity, etc. The responses in favor seem to focus on citing the benefits of a variety of businesses to choose from and generally choice and convenience for making purchases. So generally, after reviewing the liquor and licensing policy and the zoning for the site, staff do not see any reason for concern regarding this application. And the liquor and cannabis licensing regulation does require that council provide a response in a prescribed format. And there are some examples in the staff report of that format. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. I'll first turn to Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Newcomb, for the report. I guess I'll just start by acknowledging that I don't support recommending approval of this license application on the basis of its location and the 100-meter radius that's set out. My opinion, differs to that's in the staff report with respect to the significance of those locations. But that leads to my focus being on either option 2 or option 3 that council would have to give consideration. Could you elaborate a little further on option 3, which is do not make a recommendation? Because there are references throughout the report to council having to provide reasons for the recommendations and the views and the general impact in the community. I take it that does not apply to option 3. It's just that council would be making a decision not to make a recommendation stop. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, that's correct. In order to issue a cannabis retail store license, the LCRB requires a positive recommendation. If council chooses not to make a recommendation, the application does not move forward.
And again, to clarify, no further insight on the rationale for that decision is required, whereas alternatively with option 2, rationale is required for the nature of the decision.
That is my understanding. In the case of option 3, a council resolution would be seen as beneficial in order to provide the LCRB with an indication of how council received and decided on the application. But my understanding is that generally reasons are not required.
So staff would suggest, from that statement, staff would suggest that even if option 3 is moved, that the preference would be that it be with some elaboration on rationale. Is that correct? Is that what I just heard?
No, just a statement that the council has decided not to make a recommendation. So as per the suggested wording under option 3 there, where it says, indicating that the town of Sidney has decided not to give comments and recommendations on the application.
Thank you. And I guess I'll certainly yield to colleagues, Mayor, for their questions and to try and glean their thoughts on this item. To me, I guess the lack of closure with choosing option 3 might be a concern to me, in that we're not advising the applicant specifically what the concern is with this application, and when we have the opportunity to do so this evening. So those are my thoughts for the moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, good process is that when we turn to questions after the introduction of a report, we're asking questions. So we're not indicating where our support is with regards to staff recommendations or other recommendations. So, given we've started with that, I'm going to ask if for a mover of a recommendation, and we can ask questions while and motivate while it's on the floor. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move option 1 as the
Excuse me,
recommendation
Mr.
from
Mayor.
staff.
Pardon me, I'm sorry to interrupt. There appears to be a misunderstanding with the applicant about when the applicant would be able to speak during the consideration of this item. And he's requested an opportunity to be heard. He is in council chambers at the moment.
Okay, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Council, I would ask that while we're now on an agenda item and we have closed the special public participation period, that we have a motion to allow the applicant to address council as they would in public participation.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? None opposed? None are opposed. I will invite the applicant to come forward. You do have up to 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Esprit Chouinard. I live here in Sidney, and I own Canada Northwest Enterprises. I'm applying to open a retail cannabis store at 2310B Beacon Avenue, and I would like to share with you why the store will be a safe, responsible, and good fit for our community. I've been in the cannabis industry since 2019. I run 4 retail cannabis stores across British Columbia. 2 of them are Seaside Cannabis in Central Saanich. I also run the Dragon's Peak cannabis brand in Prince George and Quesnel. My stores are known for being quiet, safe, and well managed. We train staff well. We follow all rules, and we work closely with our communities. I'm also a local resident of Sidney. This means income stays local, jobs stay local, and I care deeply about how the store fits into our town. The proposal supports the goals of Sidney's official community plan. It helps build a strong local economy. It adds a walkable business to the downtown. It brings steady jobs. It supports the idea of a diverse business community. It adds activity to Beacon Avenue without noise or disruption. And it has ample on-site parking, which helps Sidney manage downtown parking needs. The storefront will be simple, clean, and welcoming. It will match the style of Sidney. Lighting will be safe for customers, but gentle and respectful for neighbors. Our goal is a clean, low-profile shop that blends in with other small businesses. I understand that cannabis stores must be run with care. Here's what we will do. Our security system will exceed provincial regulations. Staff will have panic buttons in key spots. We check the ID of anyone who looks under the age of 35. We keep the storefront clean and respectful. All activity stays inside the store. No loud music and no loitering. Our hours will be 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. These hours support business, but but still respect the area. At our other stores, people often say they hardly notice we are there. They are quiet, professional, and problem-free. Sidney is my home. I want to bring a safe, responsible, and locally owned business to our town. This store supports the OCP. It supports our local economy, and it will be a respectful and well-managed addition to Beacon Avenue. Thank you for your time and consideration. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
This participation is not an opportunity for questions, but we do thank you for taking the time to come forward this evening.
Thank you.
You might just, if you could just, Mr. Edward, or just press the microphone, or turn the microphone up. Thank you very much. So Council, we're back with the motion on the floor now, having heard that speaker, and I will turn back to Councillor Novick, please.
Actually, point of order, we haven't put the motion
It hasn't
on
been
the floor.
seconded.
I'm turning to Councillor Novick.
So Mayor, I would like to move the recommendation of option number 1, and if you wish, I could read it out as it's been written by staff.
If you could, please.
Okay. The motion is that the following response be provided to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. Number 1, that the Town of Sidney recommends that a cannabis retail store license for Seaside Cannabis to be located at Unit B, 2310 Beacon Avenue, be issued on the basis that the application is generally consistent with the Town of Sidney Liquor and Cannabis Licensing Policy number DV-015. And 2, the view of the Town of Sidney is that although there might be some negative impacts, on balance, the general impact of the proposed cannabis retail store on the community will either be minimal or generally positive. And further, that Council directs staff to provide the LCRB with a copy of all the written responses received in response to the public notification of the Seaside Cannabis referral, a summary of any responses provided in person at the December 15th, 2025 Council meeting, and a description of the methods used to gather those views.
We have a move. Do we have a seconder, please?
Second.
We have it seconded by Councillor Duck. I'll turn to the mover and seconder first, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I am not of mixed mind concerning this application. I'm a strong believer in free enterprise. I believe that if the proponent had not felt that it was a reasonable business opportunity, we wouldn't be sitting here today with this application. I don't believe it's our role to manage the number of businesses in Sidney. We don't concern ourselves if a restaurant opens up next door to another restaurant. We don't concern ourselves if a clothing shop opens up next to another clothing shop. There are 2 liquor sales stores in the Save-On Foods Mall, literally right next door to each other. And there's another one across the street. It doesn't seem to cause any concern with the population at large, and certainly doesn't cause any concern with me. I believe that this cannabis store will be run just like all the other cannabis stores, and if, as suggested by some of the opponents to this, it is too much for the market, then the market will sort itself out. There was a comment by one speaker that we have 3 stores serving 12,500 people. Well, it's well known that Sidney doesn't just serve the 12,500 people that are residents of Sidney. The Town of Sidney serves pretty much the entire Saanich Peninsula. So we're looking at probably somewhere in the order of 40 to 50,000 people. And if there's 5 or 6 stores there, I don't think that's any cause for concern. I don't believe that the closeness to the policy limits are going to provide any problems with it, for example, being less than 100 meters from, well, from a liquor store. I don't see that as a problem if it's 85 meters. I don't see a problem between cannabis and the sale of alcohol. I believe that cannabis now is normalized. It's been legal for quite a number of years in Canada. I don't believe that it could or should be demonized in any way, and we should address it just like the opening of any other store in Sidney, except, of course, for the fact that the provincial regulator requires us to make a recommendation. I believe that this is a reasonable request on the part of the proponent, and I believe that we should recommend that the license be issued.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may continue with questions through to staff.
Please do.
Just as you reported to staff in your staff report that this application meets all of the regulatory and business license requirements of the municipality, and to date meets the regulations provided by the province, and essentially we're giving our sort of stamp of approval for it to move forward from this point. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Duck, generally, yes, that's correct. I don't know what the LCRB process is from here, but yes.
Okay, thank you. And further to that, as was noted by several in public participation and yourself in the report, there are locations that this location is within some short distance to sensitive areas. Is it not true that equally the other two locations are equally proximate to sensitive areas, whether they be parks or daycares or such?
Again, through the mayor to Councillor Duck, generally, yes. I mean, Sidney is such a compact place, it's very difficult to not be in proximity to something. But I think, you know, as I said earlier, what we've seen from the current two stores is that I think some of the previous concerns that were existent when this policy was developed about proximity and things like that, we just haven't seen any outcome of that on a practical sense. As I mentioned, Truth and Alibi Cannabis is around the corner and in a direct line, about 75 meters from Lulu's daycare. And, you know, really I'm not aware of any issue resulting from that proximity. Yeah, again, you know, I walk by Truth and Alibi and Bud's on a regular basis, and they do very much function like a retail store. And I think I've, you know, seen kids walk by these stores, and there doesn't seem to be a real significant impact in the way I think it was envisioned in 2018 or 2019.
Thank you. And if I can, one last question. As was noted in public participation, or the special participation, there's the impending potential of a 1 kilometer radius. Does that, certainly everything in downtown Sydney is within 1 kilometer, so we currently have, as noted by my colleague, 4 liquor stores and 2 cannabis stores already within 1 kilometer, then within that 1 kilometer radius. Do they, anybody that's existing, get grandfathered into that and exist that way? What happens in a business just like we have, where there is only less than a kilometer distance?
Yeah, so for context, the distance from the highway to the waterfront is about 1 kilometer, so that encompasses most of Sydney's downtown. However, the LCRB did reach out to municipalities this past summer requesting input on I believe it was sort of the modernization, considering some changes to the regulation around cannabis retail stores and other elements. However, they requested comment. There were no specific proposals provided. The only place that I've heard about the 1 kilometer separation is from the industry themselves. I haven't had any communication from the LCRB suggesting that they're considering specifically a kilometer. So I really can't provide any specific information on that from the LCRB. I'm not aware of any pending regulation or something that would be coming into play or force anytime soon. And so I can't comment on what would happen if that did come into play, and you know, presumably stores might be grandfathered, but I don't know.
Thank you. So I'm speaking in favor of this motion moving forward. At a time before I was a councillor, I was a resident, and I supported truth and alibis moving forward for many of the same reasons and the same proximities and issues and sensitivities. As my colleagues noted, we're not here to determine market conditions and market development. If that was the case, we wouldn't have 13 coffee shops, 4 grocery stores, 6 pharmacies, and countless others. They all survive. They all keep going. As noted in public participation, there are currently 3 cannabis shops in proximity, 2 in town and one at McDonald Park, and a total of maybe 6 on the peninsula. Well, the same is true of our liquor stores. We have 4 in Sidney and another 2 or 3 on the peninsula in North Saanich. They all survive and they keep going. So I'm hesitant to determine what business can or cannot survive in Sidney by virtue of them meeting all the regulations, all the specifics they need to do. And the stores, as my colleagues noted, are survive on the market and what they deliver to the market. So I will continue to be in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe, please.
Thank you. I'm not in favor of this motion. And it's got nothing to do with whether the stores are going to be economically viable or not. In regards to comments from the public participation, and my colleagues are absolutely correct in that council should have no role in deciding what number of coffee shops we should have or drugstores or anything else. However, cannabis stores are different. And the reason they're different is because the provincial government and the health authorities recognize that cannabis is a substance that can have significant impacts on youth, people under 20 years old, and it can have impacts on adults as well. And so the reason why we're considering this is because of those facts. It's got nothing to do with whether they're economically viable or not. And I agree, we shouldn't get involved in that. So what I think we're missing the point on is it's not a matter of whether there's been bylaw infractions with previous cannabis stores, whether there's been violence, whether there's been crime. What we're looking at and why the municipal or the provincial government and Island Health asks us to look at these things is that the long-term impacts of normalization of cannabis in communities. And so the concern is about when youth see cannabis stores all over the place, it becomes normalized. And that's not what we want. We don't want kids to be thinking cannabis is not harmful, everybody's doing it, and so that's why we put limits on it. In regards to the distance, those recommendations came from health authorities. In fact, the distances that we adopted in our policy were below that recommended by Island Health. Island Health had actually recommended a 300-meter distance, I believe, and we opted for 200. And the reason for that was we recognize that we should give these businesses an opportunity, and if we went by those strict limits, that we wouldn't have any cannabis stores. So I think in a small downtown area like Sidney, I think 3 is too many. In regards to the comparison to alcohol and cigarettes, which that comment always comes up, people talk about the number of liquor stores and pubs there are, and that's true. Those things have done far more harm to people's health and to youth so far than cannabis had. And that's exactly why we should be paying more attention to this and being more vigilant. What we're trying to do is not repeat our past mistakes. If we had known what we know now about the impacts of alcohol and cigarettes, we might have taken a different approach, but we didn't. So this is our opportunity to limit it in our community and limit the impact on youth. So I will remain opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in favor of this application because as always, I will speak for fairness. I don't think that we should be judging a new application any differently from the way we judged the previous applications, not least because we must evaluate them based on the laws that are already here, and not, as Mr. Newcomb pointed out, the laws as brought forward by their competitors, until we are actually told by the official licensing agency that we have a law that we must act under. We can't presume that it's going to be there. If we did, we would not have been able to approve the first cannabis store that came into town. I was on council at that time, and the town hall for Truth and Alibi, the public was lined up out the door to speak against them and say, well, the same things that many of the same people said about this third store, and the same things that the same people said against the second store. And so I cannot take the idea that a new business owner in the same industry that is already kind of maligned, and every last one of them, we were told that they would destroy the vibe and charm and family friendliness of Sidney. I know Bud's Cannabis was actually going in fairly near the Scout Hall. That was one of the child places we had to look at, and at that time I was able to speak out and say, you know, one of the owners was known to the other Scout leaders because he was considering being a Scout leader, that these were good, upstanding members of our community. And we didn't have a problem with that. And that, of course, that, you know, Truth and Alibi was going in. It was going in near Lulu's. That was going to be a concern. This store is even further from Lulu's than Truth and Alibi. And so we could not, and I would like to thank Ms. Turpin for her email where she pointed out that this applicant did apply for Salt Spring, as that we would run into exactly the same legal problem, which was if Salt Spring had denied the application because they were trying to favor the existing business, they would have had the legal ability to sue, because that is not a reason we can turn down a business. They were not turning it down for that reason. They were able to turn it down because Ganges is smaller, and so their distance criteria was not met. And so using the existing criteria on the books there, that business was not able to operate. But in our case, this would absolutely apply, and so we have been shown that this applicant is very aware of their legal rights and has heard the testimony, or has heard what their competitors have said. And I think we could be quite certain that they would be therefore well within their rights to take us to court in exactly the same way if the reason we made that decision was because we were trying to favor existing stores, or we're trying to artificially limit the number of stores beyond what the existing laws for liquor and cannabis say. As Councillor O'Keefe pointed out, you know, liquor and tobacco are harmful substances, and that is why they are under a separate regulation, but it is not our job to then say we're going to go past that regulation. They're harmful, therefore they're under the same regulation. Truth and Alibi went in close to Burke's, a tobacco shop. I know the pack of cigarettes in my sock drawer has warnings even on the filter that tells me it will make me impotent. So that's a shame. And some black lungs on the pack to tell kids how dangerous it is. And so I feel we can't be the arbiters of how harmful this is to society. It would also be extraordinarily hypocritical, particularly since when I asked Mr. Burke why I managed to see so many cigarette packs on the ground that didn't have these hideous pictures, where were they coming from? And he told me where they were coming from, so I think it would be particularly bad for me as a proud Indigenous woman myself to suggest that there are business practices that types of business owners that we should try to exclude based on their business practices. So if what they're doing is legal, it's not my business. It's not my business to control what people put in their bodies. It's not my job while I sit here at this counter. So I think those, from that perspective, this business in this location does meet our goals that we have for the downtown and trying to revitalize. This is a location that is very large square footage. As has been pointed out, the cost per square footage is high. Being able to divide it up and have a business move in there, we hope would help revitalize perhaps some of that disconnected area of town. When the two breweries went in right next door to each other, they had legitimate reason to be concerned about cutting into each other's business for sure. However, what they did was speak to each other, and they very much developed business plans to make sure that they would be serving different clientele. They have a different vibe, and they coordinated with each other so that they would be enhancing the vibe, even though they're right next to each other, enhancing each other's businesses rather than being competitors. And so knowing that the two existing businesses on our side of the highway have come in and clearly speak to each other, clearly coordinate, hopefully we can have the third business do the same sort of thing and adapt to meeting a different niche of clientele. And then hopefully they will find that they all thrive together. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett next, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for everybody who's taking the time to respond around this issue. Appreciate all the feedback we can always get. Just going to read off the staff report under comments. Staff have found that the proposed use, location, and hours of operation of the proposed cannabis retail store are consistent with the requirements of zoning bylaw number 2275 and town's liquor and cannabis licensing policy number DV-015. I bring that up because to me that's important. These are the rules that we work under. Others have mentioned about the 1 kilometer. That's not what this application is. The application as it's entered is under the rules of 200 meters. The distance to the various areas of consideration, the liquor store, it's across 4 lanes of road, a massive parking lot. The park, again, across 4 lanes of Beacon Avenue and an intersection. As far as the Acorn Daycare, I took the time to walk that from where the store is proposed to be going in. And it is quite a ways away, and they don't face the same street. I'm not too considered in terms of that being a problem. This whole process is taking me down memory lane, thinking back as Councillor Duncan, back to when Happy Buddha, prior to Truth and Alibi, came in. And my whole perspective when going through this and reading all the comments was to be consistent. And I have to view this application with the same lens that I viewed Truth and Alibi's application, and the same lens with which I looked at Bud's Cannabis's application, because there was a lot of opposition when Truth and Alibi came in. One of the considerations that was different from any other one since is that at the time there was a requirement for an opaque window, so you couldn't see in, and that ran in conflict with what we wanted in our downtown in terms of pedestrian friendly, being able to look in stores. So that was one kind of aspect that was a little different. But again, Truth and Alibi met all the regulations, the zoning bylaw, the uses. So that's the lens I used to look at it with. And I wasn't, as it's come forward, there hasn't been concerns from the public, not to me, not to anybody that I know, not through staff, and the RCMP has had no concerns. Bud's Cannabis comes along, and the argument phrased then was that we can't have 2 stores. 2 stores is too many. There's no way 2 stores will ever make it. They're both still operating. They're both, as far as I know, successful. And I looked at that application with the same lens, met all the requirements, everything's there lined up. And so this application is meeting exactly, that's why I read that statement, is meeting the same requirements that we're asking. So I think to provide an applicant and say to them, we can't go forward with it because you're meeting the requirements, but it may meet, people are uncomfortable with having 3 stores as opposed to 2. Which seems to be the main concern when you read most of the emails in terms of competition, too much business. But as Councillor Novak has mentioned, that's the essence of capitalism, whether you like it or not, and that is how a free market system works. Do I hope that all are successful if this one moves ahead? Absolutely. But can I, as a council member, determine whether or not a business has an opportunity to be successful based on the fact they meet our parameters? No, I can't. So I have to be consistent in the way I approach every single one of these applications, and by doing that, and viewing it through the same lens, I will support this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gurnett. I'm turning next to Councillor O'Toole, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to my colleagues. I haven't heard anyone up here subscribe to the suggestion that we need to here to be, protect the existing businesses. Yeah, no one is up here has made that reference. I think we all get that it's not our role to look to determine how many on a competitive basis should be within the municipality. But the province has given us this, frankly, privilege to be able to shape the community and to have council be the voice on behalf of the community for how we would like to see the community grow and develop. And so, I have concerns with additional cannabis retail from the standpoint of that perspective. And I would argue that, consistency perhaps shouldn't apply as much here because, I don't imagine we want to see approval of an endless number of cannabis retail operations within the guidelines that are set. A good portion of our communities expressed concern with the volume of stores, not just from a competitive standpoint, but from a feel of the community. And I don't mean to suggest that the businesses that are operating currently have taken away at all from what makes Sidney so unique. But what I'm saying is that we've been granted this privilege to shape the community with respect to this particular type of retail business. And Councillor Keefe, I think, spoke to that to an extent. To me personally, this application in particular doesn't align with policy DV015. There are 3 specific points of reference here that are not met in the terms of that policy, and that's the location of another liquor store, that's the location of a park, that's the location of a daycare. And so, for those reasons, I'm comfortable looking to support one of the other 2 options, and I will not vote in favor of the motion that's on the floor. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. I will speak next in support of the application. I will be minimal on the economic considerations. All of my colleagues have spoken to that. Council does not have a role in determining the economic viability or opportunity or competitiveness with applications. And we have a very robust policy, DV015, in terms of the components to consider for Council's evaluation and approval guidelines for cannabis applications. And the staff report goes through it in a lot of detail. And one of the things that was mentioned in the introduction, and I will wish to highlight, is the item under location when it says reviewing an application, Council will consider the impact the cannabis retailer will have when they are located within 100 meters. And so we've had folks in correspondence, we've had speakers in public participation use that clause to say we shouldn't be locating. The policy does not say if it's within 100 meters, you do not locate. It says Council will consider the impact the cannabis retailer will have when they are located. And we have heard from staff. We see it in the staff report, and there have been colleague council members make reference to considering the first application, the second application, and this application. This third application that we're considering is a very different, we have had different input than we did during the first application. The council chamber was overflowing. We had even more correspondence, and there were concerns over loitering, community safety. While it had not been experienced at new cannabis stores in other communities, either in the capital region, on the island, elsewhere in the province, it was still pretty novel or pretty new because cannabis had only been legalized some short period of time before that. But now we have several years of experience in our community. And we've heard in the staff report, we've heard from our RCMP detachment that there have not been those types of concerns. And so I'll turn to the concern, which was a factor when we were considering it. Sorry, the other thing I want to mention about when we had input on the first application is there was no discussion of economics because it was the first application. But there was concerns over what the community impacts would be. What would the impact be to the charm of Sidney? But there were also many individuals who came forward who said that they derived health benefits from the use of cannabis, whether it was medical or otherwise. And cannabis was legalized because of the impact of the illegal market in our communities and in our country. Cannabis is legalized now. It's been legalized for a number of years. And so the concern turned in terms of the communication that another council member made with regards to Island Health, the concern over normalizing by the introduction of having legal retail cannabis stores in your community. Consider the impact of those locations on normalizing the use of cannabis. We have not had complaints with the opening of the first 2 stores from the Scout Hall, which is in close proximity, from the daycare on 4th Street that is in close proximity, from the schools, from the elementary school that we have in our community, or from families that visit parks or other family-oriented areas. We have not had that feedback from the community over a concern that this is leading to excessive normalization or normalization to some degree. So while I appreciate that back at the beginning, after cannabis was legalized, and Island Health, with their medical expertise in addictions and otherwise, made those recommendations, we have the lived experience, if you will, in our community and elsewhere. Now that isn't to say that some number of cannabis stores might not lead to excessive normalization. But we have individuals now commenting about the economic viability with this. I mean, I wouldn't be expecting several more cannabis applications. But again, it's not our economic consideration, and I don't see it having a normalizing impact in our community. It has not to date, and I do not see the addition of this location having an impact on normalizing cannabis. I'll leave my remarks there. Are there any second-time speakers? Not seeing any? I'm sorry, there is no opportunity to speak at this time. The opportunities for the public to speak were during both public participation and the special public participation period. You did come to the microphone and speak. I'm sorry, that opportunity is not provided. I will now call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? If Councillor Keefe opposed and Councillor Rantoul opposed, the motion carries. Thank you. We will pause for a moment in case there are those who wish to leave the chamber. I will ask you to be respectful of our process at council. Thank you. We'll continue with the items on our agenda. We are next turning to bylaws under section 8. And we have, I'm sorry, I didn't, when CEO Edwards and I discussed the agenda, I didn't have an indication whether we were going to receive separate introductions to the bylaws or a single introduction. But I will turn to staff. Begin with Mr. Hissick or Ms. Chen. Ms. Chen, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. So it will be just one introduction to cover all 4 bylaws. As required by the community charter, all fees and charges imposed by a municipality must be authorized by bylaw. This report brings forward the update of 4 bylaws, as I mentioned, covering a variety of fees and charges, and many of these have not been updated in some time. In light of inflationary pressures in recent years, the proposed increases are necessary to close the gap between the cost of service delivery and the related revenues. Closing that gap means less tax revenue is required to make up the difference. In addition to the proposed increases, the bylaw updates also cover the addition of a few new fees and charges to support recently introduced initiatives, and staffs are actively reviewing more fees and charges, so further updates can be expected later in the new year. The accompanying staff report discusses each of the proposed changes and additions. In total, these changes are expected to generate approximately $50,000 annually in additional revenues. As our budget continues to tighten, even this modest increase to other revenue sources will help to reduce the burden on general taxation. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to address them.
Thank you, Ms. Chen, for the introduction. Are there any questions on any of the 4 items? Councillor Gurnett?
Oh, sorry, through your mayor to staff. So are we going to be presenting these individually, separately, so we should ask questions as each one comes forward, or just all you wanted them all now?
We can take questions on any of them.
You can ask them on any of them.
So hydrant usage. It was like, I'm trying to figure out who would use that and when outside of the fire department.
Yeah. Occasionally, we do receive requests from certain businesses who would like to purchase a large volume of water. I'm not sure of the exact purposes, but occasionally there's a request, and in order to efficiently fill up whatever it is that they need, they want access to the hydrant to be able to do that.
Thank you. I would have never known that. That's interesting information. Under the animal control, this one is just more for clarification.
Sure.
When you look on the table on page 2, it's showing the proposed cost with a 5-year early payment discount for full year spayed neutered 30 and full year non-spayed neutered 45. And when you look at Schedule A, it's showing the cost as 35 and 45. So should that 5-year early payment for full year spayed neutered be 40, or should the actual one be 50? just wondering for clarification
Sure.
purposes.
Yeah, just one moment to check the schedule in the bylaw there.
I always spay and neuter my pets. Just want to put that out there, but I'm just curious.
Through the mayor to the councillor, I believe that's already showing the discounted rate, and the actual rate is 45. And so the table in the staff report is showing the discounted rate, but the bylaw itself shows initially the full fee, and then there's a statement below the schedule of fees that shows the $5 early payment discount.
I guess I'm just not seeing that.
So Schedule A of the bylaw
Yeah.
shows the fees, and then right beneath
Right.
number 1, item number 2 shows the discount of $5.
It just says discount, but it actually would be 40,
I
wouldn't
think
it?
Councillor Garnett is correct. So in the
table.
within the staff
Within the staff report, that's what was confusing to me.
The second item on the table, it should be $40.
Yeah,
because
okay.
that is reflecting the discount.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I was
Sorry.
reading that correctly.
No, you are.
No
Absolutely.
worries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? If I could ask a member to start taking, sorry, I do see Councillor O'Keefe.
has a question.
Councillor O'Keefe, go ahead.
Through you to staff mayor. I appreciate updating these, and because of staff time, and we should be recovering that. I'm wondering though if we're also looking at other ways to minimize staff's time on these things by looking at more online services, or where people can access things themselves. I'm looking at getting a printout of the OCP plan. It's online, and so I'm wondering why would we spend, can we not just tell people it's online, and if you want a printed copy, take the PDF and go print it, rather than use staff time? So just that, and if there's any other things where staff see we might be looking at other ways to improve our effectiveness.
So through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, the OCP and many of our bylaws are accessible online through our website. Occasionally we do require requests from people or receive requests from people for a printed copy. In order to recover the costs related to producing the paper copy, they have to be covered in a bylaw in order for us to charge that. Other items, staff is always constantly looking at ways of improving efficiency. Some of these things can be paid online, can be applied for online, which does reduce staff time and improve efficiency. But a lot of these costs are also related to contracted services, and some of the time required to review applications are unavoidable.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor O'Keefe. Seeing no other questions, Councillor Novick?
I'm happy to read in the recommendations.
Yes, so we'll have 3 readings, 3 separate motions on each of these 4.
Thank you. First recommendation, I move that bylaw number 2292, miscellaneous fees and charges bylaw, amendment number 23, be given first reading.
Second?
Second by Councillor Duncan. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Thank you. None are opposed. Carries.
I move that bylaw number 2292, miscellaneous fees and charges bylaw, amendment number 23, be given second reading.
Second?
Moved and seconded. This is when we normally have discussion. Any discussion?
I've got nothing to add.
Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. None are opposed. Carries.
I move that bylaw number 2292, miscellaneous fees and charges bylaw, amendment number 23, be given third reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Those in favor? None are opposed. That carries. Thank you. And we'll next turn to 8B.
I move that bylaw number 2304, Parks Bylaw Amendment number 9, be given first reading.
Second.
Those in favor? None are opposed. Carries.
I move that bylaw number 2304, Parks Bylaw Amendment number 9, be given second reading.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Those in favor? Thank you. None are opposed. It carries.
I move that bylaw number 2304, Parks Bylaw Amendment number 9, be given third reading.
Second.
Those in favor? All are in favor. That carries.
I move that bylaw number 2305, Animal License and Control Bylaw Amendment number 4, be given first reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? None are opposed. That carries.
I move that bylaw number 2305, Animal License and Control Bylaw Amendment number 4, be given second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Duck.
I just want to emphasize the point that Councillor Garnett brought up, that just for clarification, that be cleared up in the tables, because oddly enough, I had the same question with the CAO today and thought we had it resolved. So just to make sure that that's very clear to the public as to what the costs are. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now call the question. Those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you.
I move that bylaw number 2305, Animal License and Control Bylaw Amendment number 4, be given third reading.
Second.
Those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And the fourth, please.
I move that bylaw number 2306, Service Connection Fees and Charges Bylaw Amendment number 2, be given first reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Those in favor? Carries unanimous.
I move that bylaw number 2306, Service Connection Fees and Charges Bylaw Amendment number 2, be given second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Those in favor? That carries unanimous.
I move that bylaw number 2306, Service Connection Fees and Charges Bylaw Amendment number 2, be given third reading.
Second.
Those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you to the movers for taking us through those 4. We're now moving to...
Point of order.
Yes, Councillor.
May we take a short recess?
We will recess for 5 minutes and come back at 10 to 9, please. 10 to 8. I try to be in the same time zone. You're good to continue online, Councillor O'Keefe? Thank you. So next is the Mayor's report, and in turning to the report, I want to begin with a warm season's greetings to my colleagues on council and all town staff. This is our last council meeting of the year, and to my colleagues around this table, thank you for your work and commitment to your elected roles, both at our council meetings and committee meetings throughout the year, but also in each serving in an additional 4 or 5 roles as liaisons, representatives, and even full board members with external agencies and community organizations that all help make Sidney a wonderful, vibrant, and safe community. To town staff, from our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, to staff across all departments, thank you to the wide array of, for the wide array of municipal services that you provide 365 days a year, indoors and outdoors, to residents, businesses, and the community at large. And this is the busiest time of the year, as we see it picking up already, with many of us taking some time off over the holiday series. Holiday season. I want to give a special thanks in advance to our fire department and our police service, the RCMP, who keep us safe 24/7 throughout this very busy time of the year. I hope everyone's getting into the holiday spirit, and I want to wish everyone the very best over the holiday season. That's my Mayor's report for this evening. We're going to continue next with committee reports. We have 2 this evening. The first is the Advisory Planning Commission. We're receiving their minutes on our agenda this evening, and I will turn to Councillor Duck, our liaison, to take us through the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And if I just check with our, do we need the full read in? Would you prefer that, or just?
If you can read from the recommendation.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'll read the recommendations put forward by APC from their recent meeting on December 2nd. First is development permit application number DP 100854 for 9601 5th Street. The recommendation, the permit application DV 100854 to permit the form and character of a 3-unit residential development for the property at 9601 5th Street be approved, subject to the condition that the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of a building permit, 1, address design guideline number 25.3.47, screening for parking, 25.3.13-15, orient west facade to fronting street, 25.3.42, consistent material treatments and visual interest on fronting streets, 25.3.35, visibility of entrances, and 25.3.8, pedestrian pathways to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services, and 2, pay the town a deposit in the amount of 115% of estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping for the development.
We have it moved. A seconder, please.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just to add that essentially APC went with the recommendation put forward by staff with a couple of amendments to bring in additional things in terms of the entrance visibility and pedestrian byways. So I think there was a healthy discussion around this, and certainly looked at, and you'll see from the record of decision, some of the things they brought up in respect to that. So this was, of the 3 that we have coming up, this was the most challenging given the location of it on the corner of Ocean and 5th. And I think they saw the benefits of how it's been put in. And the challenge was there are different areas of the design that required certain aspects to be put in, so they came in agreement on that. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to call the question. Those in favor?
Oh,
Sorry?
question.
Sorry, I have 2 questions, and thank you for jumping in because you're quite small on the big screen, Councillor O'Keefe.
Okay.
But when you speak, you go large. So I will turn to you first.
Okay, sure. I was just curious about, I noticed that there were 2 members of the committee that were opposed on one of the motions, and I'm just curious as to what their concerns were in regards to that, if anybody recalls.
If Councillor Keefe, it's Councillor Duck, if you could give more clarification on what you're referring to, because there was only one motion relative to this development, so.
It had to do with 25.3.8 pedestrian pathways, and Mr. Diller and Mr. Ryder were opposed.
Yeah, so the challenge here, as staff will support, is that the pedestrian pathways have to be certainly located relative to the boulevard. And the challenge was the steps down to the parking area. They wanted a rampway here, and it's not feasible to do that. And I think staff provided, and the proponent provided ample description of why, but they still were seeking more of a ramp than a stairway.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Intu, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Councillor Duck. Councillor Duck, do you recall that orientation of the west facade to fronting street? Was that part of the staff recommendations, or did that come from APC's deliberations?
It came from staff, but it was sort of upgraded or discussed further by the APCs relative to its layout and positioning. Again, this is a challenging intersection because of the existing driveway that comes out of the property there, and closing that driveway down changed the facade a bit, and so it was just the layout of the building. So yeah, they still need to do some adjustment with that.
So it came from staff, and was there an indication from the proponent or the applicant that that's a feasible request? Do you recollect?
There was no direct response to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'll look to call the question. Those in favour? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Councillor, if you could just take us from the recommendation.
Sure.
Thanks.
Recommendation number 2, that the development permit application number DV 100855 to permit the form and character of a 3-unit residential development for the property at 9601 4th Street be approved, subject to the condition that the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of a building permit, 1, pay to the town a deposit in the amount of 115% of the estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping of the development.
Second. We have it moved and seconded by Councillor Gannett. Any discussion?
The next two were fairly straightforward in terms of the design elements. They have a few directions as to sort of tweaking the design around a structural beam that they thought would be in the way of the driveway in terms of people running into it with cars, and just better location of the garbage and recycling elements that were in the design, but the proponent did point out that that's not necessarily where they would be located. I think that was it on that one, unless there's any specific questions.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Councillor Duck. As I recall, and it's interesting to see them talk about the garbage and recycling as something that I had brought up. Was there any discussion, because I had concerns around the similar color palettes of the two buildings. Was that any point of discussion at any time?
Not that they agreed with the overall design, and they didn't have any issues with the coverage.
Thank you.
Relative to the garbage and recycling, it was where they were located in the diagram, and that's not necessarily where they will be located. And certainly it was pointed out that from one of the proponents, or one of the APC members that lives close by, that the garbage collection wouldn't actually be on Ocean, it would be on 4th.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favour? That carries unanimous.
And recommendation number 3, that development permit application number DP 100856 to permit the form and character of a 3-unit residential development for the property at 2436 Ocean Avenue be approved, subject to the condition that the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of a building permit, pay to the town a deposit of the amount of 115% of the estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping for the development.
We have it moved and seconded by Councillor Novick. Discussion, please.
Sorry, just to finish. Again, this was a similar design to the previous application, and in essence sits parallel and next door as a neighbor to it. Similar concerns with the additional garbage and recycling, and one additional one was that the of interest was the walk-in closet is actually you have to pass through the bathroom to get to the walk-in closet. So it was a suggestion from ABC just to look at that design, because it was just an interesting observation, I thought. That's, yeah.
I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor Novick, and then to Councillor O'Keefe.
Nothing to add.
Councillor O'Keefe, please.
Yeah, just a question, and I would have had a question last time, but I didn't act quick enough. I'm just looking at the recommendations that, under the record of decisions about moving a post, minimizing the amount of snow that land on the deck, and about the garbage and recycling and access to the walk-in closet through the ensuite bathroom. So are those things that will get done? And I'm just wondering if those are recommendations, why those are not included in the motion, or whether staff are just comfortable dealing with those recommendations without it being part of the motion.
I'll let staff echo in on this, but essentially they were not part of the recommendation and not part of relative decision-making for the APC on these elements. They were just observations that they noted that they wanted to put forward to the proponent to give consideration to. But relative to the requirements for the building, these all lie within it. And I'll turn it maybe to staff to see if there's anything they want to add to that.
Thank you. Just to comment that generally those items are issues that would be dealt with by the building code. So snow load, things like that. That's a structural issue that the building code would directly address. As well, development permits are generally for the form and character of the architectural design of the buildings. So it's those items are also somewhat outside the scope of the application here as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just to add, that's one of the challenges with that pole coming down in the driveway. It would require a significant steel beam to go across the top, which would change that structure. So that was noted by APC, but it was just a suggestion that they thought it would be kinder to the people that lived there not to have to try and dodge that pole when they had to back in or drive into their driveway.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And if I may just elaborate on what Councillor Duck has said to Councillor Keith's question. The record of decision just captures sort of the tone of a discussion. It, as he noted, is not part of the motion. I think it just helps ensure that, you know, those voices that were raised with some observations are shared with council. If council were to elect to include it in the motion, that's up to council, but it is not part of the motion that was put forward by APC. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole, for the additional context. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favour? That carries unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Duck. Next, we're turning under 12B is the Committee of the Whole meeting from December 8th. Councillor O'Keefe was the chair, and I'd ask you, Councillor, to take us through the 3 recommendations, please.
Okay.
Just from the recommendation line.
So recommendation 1, the committee moved and committee recommended, and I so move, that the committee, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 96 53rd Street be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100385 to reduce the minimum front yard setback in order to allow for a new 2-family dwelling on the subject property, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
We have moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers.
Nothing to add.
I'd just like to add that this was an interesting development application because of the current layout of the house faces onto 3rd and will then face onto Orchard. So once it's developed, so it was just interesting to try and work through the process to figure out what this is. So as people look at it, that's the discussion we had on figuring out what was the best way to lay out this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. One of the reasons why I value Committee of the Whole is to have time to think about things and absorb comments and questions and answers at that meeting before we make a decision. And I did give this some thought and actually went back and reviewed the comment from the presenter. And if others might recall, I talked about the trees on the northeast and southeast section, whether or not they'd be retained. It was, staff tried to respond, but it was more a question for the presenter, because if you're moving a building 5 feet towards the street, I thought the trees would help lessen the impact of that closer proximity. I didn't get an answer on that one. The comment was made around when I asked about adaptable units and why these were both adaptable around the demographic of Sidney, and it does cause me a bit of concern because every age demographic in Sidney needs housing. And so when we start to pigeonhole in one direction, I worry about the balance of our community going forward. As far as the unit, and I asked about parking, and I wasn't too thrilled with the response around the parking. So if somebody has an adaptable vehicle and they can't use it in the garage, they can park in the driveway. Well, then why have the garage? And the driveway is not that wide. So if you have a side ramp coming out of your vehicle for a wheelchair, do you have to hope nobody's parked in the driveway next door to be able to get out of your driveway or get out of your vehicle, and then you're parking on the street where there is no room? I just think it's really odd to have 2 adaptable units and not account, and I realize there's no space, but not account for adaptable parking for the people that would live there. And when I gave it even further thought, the whole premise of asking for the variance is flawed, because as the presenter said, was under the illusion that there was a requirement for adaptable units, 1 adaptable unit based on our regulations, and as staff said in the report and at the meeting, that is not the requirement. You don't have to build adaptable units here. So if you're now building something and asking for a variance because it's allowing for more space and turning radius and all the things they spoke to in their letter, then the whole premise and the reason for the variance is flawed, because you don't need to build those units. So my preference would be, now thinking back on, is it provide something in a design that has 1 adaptable unit or no adaptable units, and I bet you there wouldn't even need to be a variance required. So I won't support this going forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think Councillor Garnett, for his points, because I noted that at the first presentation as well, that they were saying they thought they needed to build adaptable units out in the community, and had the same thoughts. However, I'm still continuing to support this application, simply because even though we don't have it as a requirement for the single family units to have a minimum number of adaptability, it is something we have heard from members of our community that they would like more adaptable units as single-family housing, and not just to be built in multifamily housing, because everybody wants choices. And so having a developer who is willing to ask for quite a very small variance, I felt, especially with the unusualness of this lot, it seemed reasonable, because they were providing what I felt was quite a boon to the community in terms of the adaptable unit. Not being able to get a car into the driveway or into the garage is a negative, but for the comparative boon of being able to, I haven't seen anybody else who had an adaptable van in our community. Most people park it in the driveway already. It's similar to a lot of existing single family homes that have been adapted. And so I feel just having a home that could be adapted would still be such a boon, that typical limitation is there. I think a lot of people also don't park their cars in their garage anyway, because they use it for storage already. And so I'll continue to support this application as it is. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Councillor Duck.
Yes, if I could, just following up on Councillor Garnett's point, and through a question through you to staff, if I can. Was there a request for these to be adaptable, both adaptable units? And if there hadn't been, would have that changed the need for the variance? Because I'm wondering why the proponent would have gone through the process of development application variance if you didn't need to, just to get adaptable units. So I'm confused with what that case might have been. If you could clarify, please.
Through the mayor to Councillor Duck, as you see, Ms. Verhagen is not here tonight, and unfortunately I don't have that level of detail on the application. I don't believe the adaptable nature of the units is related to the variance, but I don't know that for sure, unfortunately. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looking one last time and not seeing discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Garnett is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, if you could take us through recommendation 2, please.
Yes. The committee recommended, and I so move, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 2244 Harbour Road be notified regarding development variance application number DV100382 to relax requirements in the subdivision and Development to allow overhead wiring for a marine industrial development under construction on the subject property, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance. And number 2, that the variance to allow a gravel surface and a parking area be denied.
I'll second.
We have it moved in second. I'll turn to the movers first.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask if they could be separated, because we did have variance in the votes last time.
Sure. That's a point of privilege, and I'll accept that. We'll separate the two, and I'll turn to the movers. Councillor O'Keefe.
No, I don't have, I think we had a very lengthy and full discussion on this last week. So I don't think I have anything further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor
Novick? Likewise, I think the request is reasonable under the circumstances, and I'm happy to allow it to go through.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to approach this a different way. I was somewhat troubled at the meeting by the way the discussion went, and actually by the way the motion was moved. I'm thankful to staff for correcting the fact that, or interjecting with the fact that we needed to add the radius mail-out, which was forgotten because we started to speak about supporting a variance when we need that public piece of the information to come back before decisions made. So that was, I'm glad it was correct, because that was a bit of a troubling moment for me. But the actual discussion after the motion was tabled caused me some concern, caused me enough concern to think about it that night, the next day, and rewatch the discussion. And so where I'm troubled is around what could be perceived as support for a business within this variance request. And so what I did subsequent to that is I went on and looked on the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, specifically under Division 2, which restrictions on providing assistance, Section 25(1), which says unless expressly authorized under this or another act, council must not provide a grant, benefit, advantage, or other form of assistance to a business. Now, that in itself, unless of course it says when it's to do with heritage conservation, that in itself, when in context with, and what I did after I read that act is I went and watched our discussion again with that context in mind. And I was listening to some of the conversation that was brought up that night, and I've written it down, talking about alleviating financial hardship, supporting a local business in a timely and cost-effective manner, speaking to the tariffs that the proponent spoke to, the $63,000, and how we as a local government were trying to help local business through policy. But this is an example of how we can help a business and help them save money, how there's a uniqueness of this marine district, and how we should look at changing our regulations based on the uniqueness of this area, and how there was a better use of $100,000 from putting it in the ground and instead using it to invest in the expansion or allowing it to grow or expand as a business. Now, one could perceive that as an advantage or a benefit, and in fact, I got contacted by a local business owner who expressed those exact concerns to me, which is why I'm bringing this forward as a discussion point. And so what I think it was touched on was policy, and I think if we're going to approach something like this, we should approach it from a policy level. So in particular, if council members think that this particular zoning bylaw is onerous in a financial capacity to our business community, then perhaps we need to look at a zoning bylaw amendment to remove this requirement going forward. And that way it puts everybody on a level playing field. And so I'm just concerned that there is a line. I don't think we crossed it, but I'm not comfortable where we are in the discussion based on comments that were made and based on what is allowed. I'll leave that part of the comment there. I'm still really struggling with it, and I'm going to be completely honest. As far as the actual application goes, I reread the staff report again multiple times, and their recommendation was to deny the variance, and their rationale I agree with. And I haven't seen anything to date submitted from the applicant that would provide me any reason to grant the variance that stands out as something that should be separate and makes a lot of rationale for me or makes sense to me in the context of what's been asked for. And I'll leave my comments there, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gurnett. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan next.
Yeah, thank you. I voted against this part of the motion at the last meeting for similar reasons. We knew that there were previous businesses that were doing new construction in this area. I believe 4 or 5 of them that had to underground their wiring. And I am concerned that, though I know they did not come through, and we do have a variance process for a reason, which is that businesses can have variability in their constraints, even though they're on the same road, even though they might have similar businesses. And so there is absolutely no problem with a business asking for a variance. And there's no problem with us discussing it and evaluating even if they might have unequal economic constraints. When we've heard from this business before, it was that they were seeking particular grants and they needed kind of extra help from council to make sure that they could get things in place in time to receive those grants. And that was a very different economic situation that other businesses didn't have. So I know this vote went 4-3 and so it does show that council is not, as some members of the public often express when businesses or large developers ask for a variance, that we're inclined to rubber stamp them, that we might be too pro-development. And so this does show that council does discuss it and evaluates variances on a case-by-case basis. We don't just grant them for anybody. But I am concerned that the reasons in this application given for the variance are not actually exclusive to this site. They, from my perspective, could have applied to other businesses and may very well apply for other businesses going forward. And I am not sure, when we provided things to businesses during COVID-19, we gave it on a basis to all businesses based on economic constraint. This was something where the town said, we know businesses are going to all be suffering exactly the same economic headwinds. And so we are going to, we've relaxed bylaws for restaurant awnings and lines and things like that. And we really kind of pulled out the stops, reduced business license fees. And that was across all businesses for all those categories to try and make it fair. If things like tariffs or changes in land prices or delays in manufacturing are to be taken account, I think we're going to have to take it into account in a way that can be stated up front that all businesses now going forward, we will be waiving the requirement to underground wiring based on this. Unless we can indicate that this business was having an issue with their wiring that is different from what we might find for another business, I don't know if we can apply that. And so I'll continue to vote against it. And again, and like Councillor Garnett said, that even though I think I'm voting against it for that reason, I understand the rest of council has another justification, and I think that's fine. But going forward, if we start to see more of this application, I should hope that we will start thinking about that in a way that would make it clearer, at least for me, if I had to see other variances like this going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor O'Toole?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And Councillor Duncan clarified the point that in the standpoint of, is it a level playing field? Any resident, any business can come forward and seek a variance. And so, yeah, it is. I mean, it's being given consideration the same way anyone else who comes forward requesting a variance would be. So I'm comfortable that, we've given the applicant that opportunity to apply for a variance, and the majority of committee felt that there is value in moving this forward to notification. And to be clear, going to notification provides those neighboring businesses or residents the opportunity to come to council and inform them if they are concerned. And perhaps one of those items would be around a level playing field. We'll see. They're going to have that opportunity. Or perhaps they look at it the way some members of council did and suggest that this is an employer who's looking to remove 150 feet of overhead wiring and leave 15 feet behind, reducing 135 feet, well aligned with what we're hoping to see the direction and that neighborhood move towards. So I'm happy to continue supporting this and see it go to notification. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duck, please.
Yes, I concur with my Councillor O'Toole on this. I think, the idea is that we are reducing the visible pollution from 135 feet down to 15 feet. And ultimately, the proponent will have to underground this power when the entire system's done. There's greater visible pollution along the side of the road in terms of wiring and that sort of thing. And there's not a demand right now to underground that because it doesn't exist. It may, as was pointed out by my colleagues, cost more in the future to do this. So all we're doing is offering the opportunity to the proponent, who has brought forward a variance request, is not to pay for it right now, maybe pay more in the future. So at this point, I'll still continue to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. I think that leaves myself, and I did speak in support of this at Committee of the Whole, and I'll do so again this evening. I'm not going to repeat the rationale. My rationale hasn't changed. Economics was not a consideration, which I indicated at the beginning. And the reason I'm supportive of this evening is because it's a recommendation to go to notice. The proponent during public participation has indicated that he has received some support from neighbors. This process, which is a regular part of our process to give notice for submissions, is we will see what comes back from others who have undergrounded for different reasons, and neighbors otherwise. I'll leave my comments there. Any second-time speakers? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Duncan and Councillor Gurnett is opposed. The motion carries. So these will come back to us after the notice period at a subsequent meeting.
Point of order, don't we have the second part of this?
Yeah, we do. We do. I just wanted to indicate that on that one, the notice will come back to council at a later date. So the second part of the motion was that the variance to allow gravel surface in a parking area be denied. That was moved and seconded. It's live on the floor now. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. So we're now turning to recommendation 3. Councillor O'Keefe, please.
The committee recommended, and I so move, that the development of a coastal flood hazard mitigation and adaptation plan be forwarded to the 2026 budget deliberations. Number 2, that the following grant applications be forwarded to budget deliberations. A, the climate ready plans and processes funding stream offered by FCM to fund the development of a coastal flood hazard mitigation and adaptation plan. And B, the foundations of disaster risk reduction funding stream offered by UBCM to fund the development of a coastal flood hazard mitigation and adaptation plan.
We have it moved.
Second.
And seconded. Any discussion? I'll turn to movers first.
Nothing from me.
Councillor Duck, please.
Just a point of order. In the discussion at Committee of the Whole, this was divided into 2, and I just wondered if that, Mayor, was your suggestion. I just want to know if you want to continue with that.
At your request, if you'd like to, if any member would like to divide, we'll proceed that way.
No, nothing.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries. Council, I have a motion arising on this matter. And if it has 2 parts to it, I'll read it in. I have provided it to staff, and if I have a seconder, I'll provide motivation at that time. And it is that, number 1, staff bring a report back to council on establishing a flood control level bylaw, and 2, council determine the priority level at the strategic planning session being planned for the new year, early in the new year.
A second for discussion.
Thank you. So at committee, I spoke, thanked both the proponent and staff, or sorry, the consultant and staff for the very thorough and illuminating report that, that came to us. One of the aspects of the report is that this process, that from the motion that was passed from committee, is that we will now take up to 2 years to develop a mitigation and adaptation plan. And one of the things that can come forward from that is potentially a flood control bylaw. There are other municipalities who have done it. North Saanich did it several years ago. And one of the things that struck me from the consultant's report and from questions through to staff is that the consultant, I think, demonstrated with regards to flood control level in terms of identifying 29 transects for our shoreline and establishing a foreshore FCL level and a backshore FCL level. That while there will be many different aspects to an adaptation and mitigation plan, either dealing with roadway infrastructure or parks that we have on the waterfront and that, those transects, many of those transects affect residential areas and commercial areas. And what we have seen since those of us who served on the last council in 2019 is we have seen a number of applications come forward, and the current process, as per the provincial government, is that an engineer needs to sign off on the FCL. And we don't question that because it's a professional information that's provided to us. However, we've seen significant differences in FCL, whether the FCL goes forward or not. And we did, from seeing some of the first developments, whether it was the RISE that put in the full FCL, or whether it was a residential development on Ocean that put FCL in and turned it into a taller building in that neighborhood. We could see that going forward, not just in those first years, but as we go forward in the many years to come, that we are going to see differences within the neighborhood. Because there will be those that will respond to the full FCL and others who may not. And I would like, this motion is for council, or is for staff to bring back to council the process to establish a flood control level. And staff, through looking at it and perhaps drawing comparisons with other municipalities that have done it, may recommend that we don't do it at this time. But I think waiting 2 years to consider will have missed further developments that will be occurring in areas that do have FCL. And I think there is some consistency that could be brought to those neighborhoods that were identified in the report by having an FCL. And I think the level of priority, given that it would be a new bylaw, would be a significant project for staff to bring forward, that while we're reviewing our strategic plan and the priorities in the strategic plan, we're targeting January at an open meeting, is that we could discuss the priority level at that time, whether it's in 2026 or beyond. I'll leave my comments there and turn to others. Councillor Duck.
I have a question.
I will support this motion going forward. I think it's an important thing to do because in the aspects of the RISE and the properties on Ocean, this is primarily addressing blue water flood construction levels, which is the continual rise of the ocean that may inundate this area primarily. I would hope within this bylaw we also address whitewater flooding, and I think that's probably the main obstacle we have coming forward against us in the next 40 to 50 years. And I think this will give better direction to how we mitigate the waterfront in areas that are disturbed, or instead of, as the consultants said, the worst thing we can do is hard armor or seawall ocean fronts because it doesn't mitigate whitewater flooding. And so I'm hoping within the bylaw this will give some structure to help manage the process forward as we run into these incidences where we're looking at how we handle whitewater flooding on areas of the transects that the mayor identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. Through you, just to staff, to get I guess your insight on what's suggested here, how productive is it to pull, in your minds, one component of the plan that's going to be crafted, albeit over a 2-year period, to address an FCL, flood construction level bylaw, separately as is suggested in this motion?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, I may also turn to our Director of Community Planning for additions to my response, but I think that the mayor's likely correct in that within the broader, more comprehensive climate or flood inundation adaptation plan that we would develop, there'd likely be a flood construction elevation bylaw that we would be looking towards, and we have been talking about that at a staff level to quite a bit, informal extent of, how would we move forward in developing the town, and so I don't think it's unreasonable approach to tease this piece out and advance it, in parallel or even ahead of a broader, more comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Newcomb?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my thought on this would be that what staff have heard from the community is concern about sort of a hard infrastructure approach to flood mitigation. So, concrete seawalls, riprap, large, raising properties by a significant amount, which necessitates some sort of engineered infrastructure to ensure that those properties can be properly built upon. And a desire, I think, from some members of the community to at least see the potential for a more natural approach to flood mitigation, whether that's sort of a Green Shores approach or something similar. I would say that likely an FCL bylaw would be challenged to tease out that more natural approach to flood mitigation. It's a bit of a blunt instrument, I think, in that regard, in that, really what it's looking for is properties to be built at a certain elevation, and it leaves it to the applicant to figure out how to meet the standard provided by that bylaw. And generally, the approach taken by applicants is, what's the shortest path to get there, not what's the sort of nuanced, longer term, more difficult to bring forward solution that, might involve things that don't involve an engineered approach and a bit more of like a studied approach. Certainly, I think an FCL bylaw would help set a broader standard for flood construction and mitigation across the community. I'm just not sure it would achieve that level of expectation that I think we've heard from the community, especially around areas that have strong environmental significance like Roberts Bay or those areas. So definitely a challenging sort of two-part approach there. Thank you.
Councillor? You're good. I have Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Novick.
Thank you. I'm in support of this. I think it's a good idea. When we talked about this last time, I had concerns about the mitigation and adaptation plan because it's so large, and that's, my questions about whether there's aspects that we could, phase in or do separately. So this is something that I think that we could do. If we're going to talk about it at strategic planning, I'd also be interested in not just talking about this, but the scope of what we want that plan to look like. And so whether we know from the report that sea level rise isn't going to necessarily impact us significantly for another 50 years. And so whether we want to focus our plan on a shorter time frame. So But the FCL, I think this is a good idea to deal with that sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Novick?
Thank you, Mayor. In principle, I support the idea of a bylaw. My concern, however, is with timing, and so I'd like to ask a question to staff through you, if I may, and that would be, would not the development of this coastal flood hazard mitigation and adaptation plan be needed in its completeness to inform the creation of a flood control level bylaw or flood construction level bylaw? Don't you, isn't it kind of a cart and horse situation? You need the studies, the plan, and get all the information down before we craft the bylaw. If we craft the bylaw too soon, we may find that, well, that it doesn't align with the mitigation and adaptation plan.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and I think there's some truth to what you're saying there, but I also believe that it is possible to advance this particular element in parallel or even in advance of the planning. So it is possible, like I think no matter what comes out of the broader plan, it'll be a multi-pronged approach, and so it is entirely possible that the town could endeavor to do some larger scale, ambitious style projects that would reduce the FCL levels that we might contemplate. But those types of projects would be very costly and very time consuming and would be probably decades in the making. And so I'm talking about either, you know, strategic retreats where we're actually purchasing properties over decades, or we're talking about like a large scale berm or diking type system where that would mitigate the need to then have flood construction elevations. And so, but in the more immediate term, I think having a flood construction elevation, flood construction level bylaw is a relatively straightforward approach to the immediate problem that we see and we know that we're facing. And it may be that after development of the more comprehensive plan that we would then revisit the bylaw to make adjustments if it was deemed necessary. But I think we already have the data from this consultant's report that would, and that's the data that would be required to develop the bylaw, or the bulk of the data for that bylaw. One element of this work, though, and I'm glad that the mayor did identify a need to, prioritize this against other initiatives that are already underway, is that, this would be no small undertaking, and that it would require a fair bit of staff time, and whether or not we'd be able to achieve it by the end of 2026 is not something that we can comment to tonight.
Thank you. I'll turn to Mr. Newcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to comment that I misheard the first part of the motion, and I see that, or I understand that it's to bring forward a report on the possibility of an FCL bylaw in the short term. Certainly, that's doable. Given the timeline for a mitigation and adaptation plan, definitely seems worthwhile looking at to the options in the short term. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I had Councillor Duncan next. Sorry, it's written right down. It's written right here.
It's me. I guess I'm slightly on the fence about the motion because I want to ask a question through to staff, but I want to make sure it's based on a correct understanding of what we heard from the consultants about this, that I believe that the blue water issue, blue water flooding was over 50 years. I think it was maybe 80 years before we were 70. Thank you. And so that's about one lifespan of the residential buildings. I think when we're looking at like capital assets, 80 years is for a building. And so for a lot of anything we'd be building here, that would not be our impetus for a flood construction level. What we're looking at obviously is whitewater logs and stuff being tossed at things right against the waterfront. For places further back where we're having flood construction level, I believe what we're seeing there is something that our consultants didn't have in this report, which was that the ocean doesn't come just from the ocean when you're down there, it comes up from the storm drains. And we've had that happen quite a number of times, and it will happen probably every few years when we get an atmospheric river, long before we see the blue water flooding that they've modeled. And so the figures we see in the report are a fairly kind of good approximation of the area that might already be affected by that kind of thing, certainly that we saw with the atmospheric river 2 years ago, was it? 2020. Was that really 4 years ago? Okay. I swear there was another one where the boat washed up against the Tallista Park, but and everything was underwater again. There was a very big one in 2012 as well. So if we were to do this flood construction level, which none of this, the existing coastal flood hazard mitigation adaptation plan kind of scoped out that sort of flooding. If we had an FCL bylaw pulled out, does that help capture and protect some of the properties from that flooding we will know would hit us first based on kind of the practices we already have in place with the engineering reports?
Yes, this past winter, 2024, December 12th, I think it was, we saw a fairly significant flood event in the low-lying area of Ocean Avenue and the ferry terminal area. And so there was at least a foot of water in that entire area. And in some cases, it was almost 2 feet of water. And there is a more significant risk if that water does overflow ocean into, it's like 3rd Street. There's quite a depression in behind there, and then it can be difficult for that water to escape. And so, right now we already do require flood construction levels, but they're established by individual reports from individual professionals. The idea with the bylaw is that we would be able to maintain some uniformity across the neighborhood and how those properties redevelop. And so because we are seeing a difference in those properties being redeveloped right now, and so the idea with the bylaw is to bring some uniformity to the development of the neighborhood. And just for clarity, we don't necessarily have a problem with seawater coming up through our storm drains. It's rather it's basically like a sea lock or a water lock, and so our drains cannot drain because they are inundated with seawater. And so we have this problem with flooding from a rain event and the whitewater, as the consultants described, but it can't drain because the drains are locked with the seawater. The only way to overcome that is through pumping, and you get into very expensive, complex systems that City of Delta and Richmond have to contend with, and I don't think we're at that level. But yes, this would address some of our more immediate problems that we already are witnessing.
Thank you, and thank you for clarifying. I do not wish to give anyone the impression that it was our town's storm drains allowing people's property to be flooded. And thank you for the clarification of the mechanism on that one, and that what we're doing is what we can do. And so I'm happy to support this motion, because I think when we get into the issues of modeling and really long-term adaptation plans, people can begin questioning our models. And that's part of why we had the boys out there in the first place, is we did want more site-specific data. But now this means people don't have to trust the model. They don't have to try to trust long-term projections, which might change. This is something that we can put in place right now that helps with something that we already know is a problem based on current mechanics. And I feel really good about being able to support that and going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Edwards, please.
Just in consideration of this motion, you know, staff will endeavor to try to, if it were to pass, you know, staff would endeavor to try to bring back a report prior to budget finalization. But I do want to recognize that we are in a bit of a scheduling and time crunch with that regard as well. And so this currently isn't on staff's radar, and so you know, with the aim to try to have our budget approved by early March, it might be possible to bring that report back prior to that time frame, but I just want to highlight that for council's consideration.
Thank you for that. Any additional discussion or any further discussion? Sorry, seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. So we're next turning to staff reports. And we have 13B, which is the monthly building permit report for November. There's no recommendation, it's for information. Is there any questions or comments from members of council? Not seeing any. We're turning next to the item 14A that was raised from correspondence for information. It was item 15.4, which is a letter, an email from Nick B. With regards to the Bowerbank Piercy intersection and concerns over some safety issues at that point. I've touched base with staff, and staff feel that, well, I'll let them speak first, and then have a comment after that. If you could speak to considerations that staff have given to that intersection, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I may turn to our Director of Engineering, who's online as well, Brian Murphy. But in asking Brian for an update about this, he was able to confirm that staff are aware of the neighborhood concerns of compliance at this particular intersection. And you may recall that we did recently secure an RCMP member that is more dedicated to traffic enforcement, and we had been missing that for a while, and so we're happy to have that resource back. And our Director of Engineering, Brian Murphy, did reach out to the RCMP commander and raise this issue, and they have identified that through the month of December and January, they have committed to increasing their monitoring and assessing concerns, and you know, they would start with you know, education and awareness before they'd move to ticketing, and that's the nature of how we address these types of things in Sidney. And so we understand that, you know, the RCMP is aware and will be focusing some attention on the intersection, and I would just want to turn to the director to see if there's anything that he would like to add.
Mr. Murphy, good evening.
Good evening. You can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, great. So yes, thank you, Mr. Edwards. That's all accurate. So we did ask and request that the RCMP, if they could look into compliance, non-compliance at the intersection, and so they've agreed and asked the traffic officer to spend some time there, first observing and even inquiring with those who choose to not follow the directions, to inquire, you know, why and where they headed and that sort of thing, and then to consider moving to enforcement if there's repeat offenders. And but they've offered to so to take that on over the next weeks and into January, and then to essentially report back to us on what they've found and how much action they took. And then we can review from there whether more enforcement's needed, or at least have an assessment of what the situation is.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. So based on that, I'd like to just a simple motion that staff provide a reply to the letter writer.
So moved.
Discussion or questions? Councillor Duncan?
Well, I had a question just to staff based on the question or the comment risen during public participation about signage for this intersection if it goes back to this traffic pattern.
Go ahead.
Or due to the changes in traffic patterns. So, I mean, one of the things when we looked at this bikeway was that the things that were put in were fairly low. They didn't require a lot of really hard new construction, and in theory could be removable at a later date, albeit with quite some expense to break up cement, but it's possible. So some of the letters we got when people didn't like this was that this was going to be limiting the emergency evacuation routes in the event of an emergency. And we just had an incident where it turned out our main thoroughfare was shut down for an emergency, and this was used. So that this was able to be reused as an evacuation route. I was actually quite happy that we had this trial and that we're able to provide this information now to the public that if there were in fact an emergency and this needed to be reopened as an evacuation route, it looks like it could be. And so further to that, we heard that because obviously not everyone who'd be using this would know that the traffic pattern had changed because of an emergency. Does the town have signage that we could place at certain points to indicate to people that the traffic pattern had reverted back temporarily, just to make sure that we didn't then reintroduce a conflict people were unprepared for?
I'll turn to staff. Mr. Murphy, perhaps?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Duncan. So yes, today was an interesting experience. Field staff made some quick decisions, and so my understanding of what happened today, and not all of this may have actually happened in the time frame, but certainly what was discussed was to put garbage bags over the restrictive signs. And then I had actually requested to put a detour right arrow at the Bower Bank intersection there. And so those were some quick, in the moment actions to try to reopen Bower Bank as a detour, as a bypass from Rest Haven. Speaking to the individual who spoke in the public participation, that at the time today I was a little concerned in that this would cause some unlearning of the patterns we're trying to establish, but it was certainly a valid approach, and and perhaps we could prepare a sign that's more explicit, that could be deployed in an emergency. Again, back to the speaker today, I don't know that it would be possible to establish thresholds just because we can't foresee everything that will happen, right? Until today, wouldn't have occurred to me that Rest Haven might be closed due to a tree sparking on hydro lines. So it's just not possible to map out all the feasible scenarios, but it certainly could be possible to create some more specific signs saying detour, Bower Bank is open, kind of thing. So it was an interesting experience today, and hopefully it doesn't undo too much of the learnings that we've been hoping for. But yes, as you've indicated, it is an advantage of the light touch to construction on the bikeway, is that it is still available as a usable road, fully usable, as needed.
So thank you. I'm trying to think of how to make sure that this comes back to us, or that gets captured properly in our town-like emergency planning scenarios. The CAO is here. I don't feel like it's something I need to make a motion for. I feel that if the chief was here, he could answer this, that we already know that we have emergency response routes, emergency evacuation routes, and we have all of these emergency response plans. The Chief Mickelson, you know, updates that plan every 5 years. And so I'm assuming we have something in place, or could have something in place. And so I just want to make sure that what it seems like something that we could actually have this as part of our emergency plans going forward, that if there was something, a tsunami, a fire, down to power lines, we would have somewhere the ability to put signs up or have maps that show people where the approved alternate routes are in events of emergencies, and which are already designated evacuation routes in the course of emergency. And I'm sure Mr. Mickelson would tell me they already know that, but I'm just wondering how we would signal that to the public, and if this is something that will let us think about that for when the staff is next going through the cycle of updating those plans, and how that makes sure we get that captured.
Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, I can circle back with the chief to inquire about what they have in place for those types of things. But I do also want to just clarify, in the event of a tsunami, we're not known to be at risk of like significant inundation. Like it's not really a risk through our own work and analysis that we're concerned about flooding from tsunami. And so, but definitely, you know, we want to be able to provide clear routing for any kind of evacuation that might occur. And yeah, I don't know that, unless council would desire, I don't know that there's a need to report back to council on what that looks like. But as you say, I'm sure the chief is already has multiple contingency plans in place.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think council would, I personally wasn't, that's why I said I wasn't going to make a motion to have it come back to council before the next iteration of the ERP would come forward. And as you pointed out, you know, the tsunami, I think potential here was to 4 meters, which does not go very far, and mostly it would be some people on the waterfront would get their feet wet. Naturally, many residents in our town are unaware of that fact. And so having a sense of what emergencies would actually be required, and it turns out down power lines could be one, forest fires could be one, something like that, would be important to make sure people understood that there was something there and the town had that in place. So I'm happy with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe, please.
Thanks. Just a quick thing on the signs. I'm not worried about that at all. I don't think we have to do anything more on that. This was a one-off situation. In these sorts of circumstances, if you got to put a plastic bag over the sign and put up some detour signs, I think that's fine. I don't think we can possibly consider all the eventualities of potential emergencies that might happen on all the Sidney streets. So I'm happy to just leave things as they are, and as things pop up, staff will respond accordingly. I'm happy with how they've responded. My question through you, Mayor, through staff, was getting back to Bower Bank and the safety issue there. In regards, when we first talked about putting in the bikeway, my recollection is that staff were wanting to reduce the number of vehicles traveling on Bower Bank by a certain amount. And so what I'm wondering is, if we have those counters set up now, and if not, when those might be established, because it seems to me that's part of this equation as well, not just doing the enforcement, but also monitoring the amount of traffic that's going that way now. So my question to staff is, are we currently monitoring the traffic count on Bower Bank?
I'll turn to Mr. Murphy again.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. Yes, so there's 2 types of counts that need to happen. One is for the bicyclist usage. So the town collected before counts, and through the grant is required to collect after counts to hopefully see an increase in bicycle usage. Those are still to come. We're going to wait for a bit nicer weather to hopefully get more cyclists in those counts. But then the other counts are, yes, what are the impacts to traffic and how have the flows on Bowerbank and around Bowerbank changed? And so we have started doing those counts. So one street was completed last week. The counts will continue over the next few weeks and through January. And so no results to report yet, but yes, we are starting those counts, and hopefully there will be enough data to show a difference. Otherwise we may have to repeat the counts later in the spring, but yes, they have started and will be coming.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duck?
Thank you, Mayor. I support the motion moving forward to respond to Nick B. In fact, I would hope that we'd elevate it to educate the public. I happen to live in this neighborhood and pass this exact intersection on foot twice a day. And within the minute that I'm in that location, there are multiple, not just single, multiple cars not following the rules. And I've been there when the RCMP did their first education enforcement. I wasn't sure if there was enforcement involved because I wasn't close enough to see if they were giving tickets, but they were very busy. We're constructing a transport way that is a significant change of habits for people, and it will take some time, and certainly we're getting some feedback from the neighborhood on how well that's going or not going. And so in fact, not only would I respond in a letter to Nick B, but also maybe profile this in Town Talk and our social media. And if not, even give consideration to a pop-up information tent at that location in the park, perhaps. This is our first active transportation plan project, and it's nearing completion, and I think it would be valuable to educate the public on what it means and and that may be the opportunity of just having somebody there. Maybe this is like the RCMP have that volunteer safety group that can go out and measure speeds, and that maybe they can be the proponents there, so we get a little bit more education. I fear that the only way we're going to do is enforcement, and significant enforcement, because it's not changing the habits of people there. The drive-throughs in the wrong direction are multiple. In fact, it's quite interesting because the drive-through southbound is painted very bright red and big signs that say do not enter and that. And what most people are doing now is that, oh my, I can't go across the red. They go around and go the opposite way and go down that way. And so they're further violating the traffic pattern. So it's going to be interesting to see how we can motivate people to change their habits and continue in a different direction. So I would like to see not only the response to Nick B, but also further communication both on our social media platforms and Town Talks, and maybe even can give consideration to a pop-up tent in the park there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just be, the motion is specific to responding to the writer of this. We can leave your comments with staff. We understand our CMP are taking an approach to this now, and staff may as well. But I think specific direction would have to come from a motion arising, as you might wish. Any further discussion on the motion? Oh, sorry, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for raising this item and for my fellow colleagues and their comments. I've been visiting the Bowerbank Bikeway for 6 months. I go there every week just to see as it's unfolded and been built, and just to see the reaction of people driving. And what I've noticed, similar to what Councillor Duck was saying, is that in my visits there, consistently I'm seeing more and more people going the wrong way in the east part of the coming through, heading southbound. So they're and what I'm concerned about is if somebody's turning right off of Calvin, now that we have a bump out there. I watched a person on Saturday go through the wrong side at about 50 to 60 kilometers an hour, and if somebody was turning right, that could have been not pleasant. So I'm hopeful. I'm great that we're responding to the letter, and I'm glad to hear that staff has reached out to the RCMP for some kind of education enforcement. Like Councillor Duck, I think it's going to have to be enforcement, because as I've gone out there over the course of time, it seems to be getting more and more vehicles are not observing the rules, And now that I've seen this uptake in what I consider very dangerous driving, I think it's more important than ever for them to be present. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you.
Motion arising?
Please.
Yes, I'd like to recommend that staff look at an enhanced communication program on this first active transportation project being completed in the terms of town talk, social media, and potentially a pop-up tent in the area.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Keefe seconds. I'll let you, you did provide some motivation, but I'll let you continue, Councillor.
So yeah, as I said earlier, is that we're changing a significant habit here. Bowerbank has been the byway. As a resident there, I took it many times, and we're now asking people to continue down Ardwell to Resthaven and come into the community that way. And certainly from the other end, similarly, Siddle was a major access point, and now we're directing that traffic down Mills. This is a big traffic change for people who live in that area, and I think it's worthwhile helping them understand the changes that have been made and elevating our communication and education so that this information is getting out there, because I would offer an opportunity in betting that the majority of the people that are not following the rules right there are residents in that exact area. They're not looking for a cut through, they're looking to get home. And so it would be interesting to see and get their feedback on the impact of this on their journeys. It really is not much of a drive around whether you're coming north or south. But I think we need to elevate our communication and education to assist this project being successful, as well as assist in the community safety aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the seconder.
Nothing more to add. That covers it, I think.
Before going to Councillor Duncan as the next speaker, I'm just going to turn to staff. The wording of this motion provide reasonable direction or understandable direction for staff?
Sure, if I could ask the corporate officer to repeat the motion.
Okay, that staff look at an enhanced communication program on this first ATP completed project through town talk, social media, and potential pop-up tent in the area. Pop-up tent event, I guess, in the area.
I would say that the potential pop-up tent is not specific enough, and I would actually recommend against a pop-up tent. I don't think that would be a valuable use of staff time. I don't think a pop-up tent is going to cause anybody to stop and want to have a chat about what's happening there. I would recommend that we continue with the RCMP awareness and enforcement campaign, and staff can look at other opportunities to try to increase awareness, but I would recommend against any kind of on-the-ground staff presence at that location.
Thank you. Again, before going to Councillor Duncan, I might ask the movers to consider the first part of the motion made reference to communication, and then it gave examples of communication. Perhaps perhaps the motion could be amended to provide communication, and it would be at staff's direction or staff's discretion in terms of the modes and of communication that could reinforce what we've discussed tonight. Councillor Duff?
I'm going to continue to, with the motion as stated. I believe the pop-up tent is a feedback loop that we do not have in place right now.
Okay, no, fair enough. I just wanted clarification whether you wish to amend. And so, Councillor Keefe, you were the seconder. You didn't have any speak. I'm now going to Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question through to staff on this one, because we had a communication in a campaign around this in the active transportation plan. Communications campaigns are expensive. Staff time exists is limited. If staff was to try, or if staff was to relaunch a communication campaign or education campaign, which would be kind of a new bit of project on this, like this, when would staff envision having the time and resources to put materials and staff on the ground for this again? Can staff picture kind of what's being requested from this motion and estimate when this could happen?
I think it's feasible to consider perhaps some social media, perhaps the idea of like town talk, and without our director or manager of communications here, I wouldn't want to speculate too much because I would really value their input and expertise on this. But I would recommend against the on-the-ground piece and the pop-up tent. I'll reiterate, I do not see that about being a valuable use of staff time. And I would also be concerned that, staff would be being put in a situation that would be potentially very uncomfortable, because we do know that there can be some pretty negative or there are some pretty negative comments and concerns circulating out there around this project, and I would not be entirely comfortable putting staff into that position.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. I am going to vote against this for that reason as one of them. If I believed that people were confused about this but had really intended to follow the rules but just didn't understand how the new bikeway worked, I would agree that perhaps some additional communication be warranted. We have heard, it sounds like this is being done very deliberately. This letter writer suggested people were committing what is kind of a crime, not just going around these barriers, but actually using their vehicles in a way that would be considered like attempted vehicular manslaughter, if their account is correct, and intimidation. I do not want to give the general public the idea that if they threaten people enough, and certainly as the person who was a known cyclist who used to live in this area and who had kids who used to take this route, I received that personally, that if they just personally threaten the people using this route enough, children, pedestrians, other cyclists, people they thought voted for it, that we'll change it back because they will have demonstrated to us enough that it inconvenienced them in a way that they're going to break the law and intimidate people and create dangerous situations. And they'll just keep creating dangerous situations until we change it back. And we'd like them to tell us more about how they don't understand it and they're going to keep driving like this. I don't want that to be the thing. If people are going to, once something's in place and it's breaking the law and I'm hearing people are behaving dangerously, I'm not, and it sounds like we've not been given any indication it's an accident or a misunderstanding. I don't want to have more communication about that's why we need to reevaluate it and why staff needs to hear more from them. I just want them to enforce it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly understand my colleagues' concern with this. I actually went down there today when Rest Haven was closed, and I'm never in that part of town, but I was dismayed at the signage. I felt that the signage was not very driver friendly. Anyway, as somebody who was driving. Emergency scenario notwithstanding, all there was a sign that said no thoroughfare. Didn't really help me very much with getting back to somewhere where I could drive. I think it requires a little more than education. I tend to disagree with the pop-up tent as well. I think education goes hand in hand with proper signage. And you know, for that reason, I don't really want to support this motion because I think I think it's a bigger problem than can simply be solved by a communication project. And perhaps I would, you know, in the future studies of the traffic in that area will dictate a little bit more in the way of constructive signage. I just don't see this as being very helpful at this point in time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I similar to Councillor Duncan, I'm more about the enforcement and or education, if you want to phrase it that way. The signage is pretty adequate. I think everybody knows what a do not enter sign looks like, and there's multiple ones there. And we're not the UK. We don't drive on the left-hand side of the road. So I don't, unless you're a recent transplant from that part of the world, I don't know why you would go on that side of the road. And I've seen people approach it, realize they can't go, and then speed up. So, I mean, I think a lot of this is, for some people, intentional. For other people, maybe they don't know. But if I'm driving a car and I see a do not enter sign, that's pretty self-explanatory that you shouldn't go through there. So I think I understand what Councillor Duck is alluding to, but I also understand staff's concern about how staff could potentially be treated, because speaking to the staff who were working out there, while I went out there week after week, they were succumbed to verbal abuse on regular occasions, and I don't want our staff to go through that again. And hopefully they wouldn't go through that, but based on what I heard from our staff working out there, I'm not confident it wouldn't happen, so I wouldn't want to put them in that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, Councillor Duck, for a second time.
Thank you, Mayor. I get the general trend from my colleagues that this motion will fail, so I would just emphasize that I would encourage some sort of feedback loop that we can get, and I appreciate the concern of staff on the ground, but we need to find out from people how our active transportation plan, Project 1, is going, and certainly educate them as to the purpose. And some of that can be done through our communications, but I think we also need to seek feedback, and I just encourage us to continue looking for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. And you know, we need to be careful when we start getting into the weeds in operations. You know, staff have acted proactively to this letter. We've heard that our Director of Engineering approached the detachment commander, and you know, a campaign of education, awareness, and enforcement has commenced. And I believe if staff felt some additional communication with regards to education and awareness, or that enforcement is in effect, that they will do that as they've done it with other projects and initiatives in town. So I'll seek to call the question now. All those in favor? Opposed? The remaining council members are opposed. The motion is defeated. We have the remaining items of correspondence that we're receiving on our agenda for information. There's no motion required, and we do have a motion to go on camera.
I'll move in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters regarding personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for an appointment pursuant to section 90.1A of the community charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
We have a second. Those in favor? Thank you. We'll go on camera. We'll reconvene at 9.